Heavenly Father, we pray for your blessing on our day as we give thanks to you for the progress that we've made so far. Thank you, Lord, for the peace and camaraderie that you've built in this room over the last couple of days. And that's a good thing. As we move forward, we pray for your blessing on our deliberations, the calmness and peace of the committee, as well as the delegates that may speak before us, either virtually or in person. And as we go through this day, Lord, we're going to finish our first work product. Yes. And I pray that that reflects not just our Republican values, but something of your will too. And Heavenly Father, without your presence in the room with us, I don't think we stand a chance. So Heavenly Father, I pray that you would help us all to speak and act in a manner worthy of your holy presence. And we pray in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Janera, would you go with actually both pledges, if you don't mind?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
There we go. We got somebody. Okay, Ms. Lugo, would you call the roll?
Mark Ramsey.
Here.
Marty Ryan. Present. Marty Reed.
Present.
Paulette Carson.
Present.
Walter West.
He's not here.
Madeline Hoosier.
Here.
Keith Nelson. J.R. Haas.
Present.
Shelby Williams.
Present.
Rich.
Biak, here.
Thank you. Jesse Taylor.
Present.
Julie Peckman.
Present.
John Gaspard. Jonathan Gaspard.
That's present.
Gene Cack.
Present.
Justin Till.
Present.
Dale Stannard.
Present.
Elizabeth Case.
I am here.
John Shipping.
Here, Sheila.
Paul Yamrick.
Here.
Marion Nelson. Here. Aaron Pena. Aaron Pena. Terry Harper.
I'm here, and I'm keeping Aaron's chair warm.
Thank you. Paul Hudson.
He is not here waiting for the Zoom link.
Troy Jackson.
Here.
Chip Howell. Chip Howell.
He's not here.
Walt Smith.
He's not here yet.
He's also waiting for the
He's
Zoom link.
going by too.
Michael DeFundle.
Present.
Janera Lewis.
Present.
Lyle Ann McKinnon.
Here.
Hans Sassenfeld.
Here.
John Barry.
Here.
Matthew Stringer. Matthew Stringer?
He said he was running behind.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, members. We've got, gonna try real hard to get out of here as soon as possible, hopefully early afternoon, but we're gonna get the work done, and we're gonna have a super product. We've got a great committee. I'm really optimistic about this. Here's the plan going forward that I think will both be time efficient and help to address things that remain for us. First of all, I want to do every single person in here, including when we get the Zoom link up, the two that are coming in by Zoom, to identify anything that is something near and dear to your district that you think may not have made the cut at this point or couldn't be worked into one of the ones that have already? Okay, so we talked about yesterday that we'd have another shot to get something back in. We will still have in the permanent committee opportunity to substitute something for maybe one of the ones that we think are not quite as important at the end, probably not the top ones. But for now, before we go into kind of a final culling, if there's something that's been left off the list that you feel very passionate about, this would be your chance to identify that. I'm going to ask that you put one filter on it, and one filter only, and that you stick to issues that you personally have talked with a legislator who is, or know of a legislator that is willing to put his on that bill to go forward, okay? So we're looking at adding possibly another handful before we do a culling vote. And if you've got something that's not on the list right now, but is a very big deal, and there's a legislator, preferably yours, somebody else's perhaps, that is willing to put their name on such a bill, that's what we're doing at this point, okay? Going forward, and there's some that I've identified already, I'll just throw them out there so we don't have to repeat these. I think most of these are in there, I don't think all of them are. One is the appraisal board's issue, going with the sales price of property instead of appraisal boards every year. There are several legislators I know of that are willing to put that one back in this time. It was a bill last time. Taxpayer-funded lobbying, obviously there's several there. We don't have to repeat that one. Power grid, obviously Senator Hall's willing to carry that one. There's one I'm not sure made the cut. It's one that a medical doctor that's one of my reps actually wants in. It's an answer to Democrats, Medicaid for all, and basically it's full transparency on medical costs, and that one might be consideration for somebody to add to the list. I'm not going to do that. When we've gone around the table, my plan is to revote all the ones that we've got left. I lost track. I think we're at about 20 right now. Only we'll do it en masse, all of them lumped together. And we'll do a forced ranking just like we did yesterday by committee. We'll figure out what the top ones are. And then we'll break back into subcommittees with the 15 that are left at that point, and the appropriate subcommittees that had the planks initially will work on the wordsmithing very hard and very fast for only about 45 minutes or an hour. And if we don't get it perfect, here's the plan. Since we're trying to get out of here early, and it's going to be virtual for Thursday night, is that we will set up a Google document. Most of you at least are somewhat familiar with Google Docs. And if you want to suggest edits to go into the final report by the permanent committee, then we'll do that as comments after you've been elected or have those ready to go. And then we should be able to knock those edits out very, very quickly tomorrow night. Okay, does that make sense? So we may have a somewhat rough product now going forward in the interest of trying to make adjustments for COVID. We will have a Google Doc online. If you're not familiar with it, I'll walk you through it offline, but you can go through and I'll only give you initially commenting authority. And what that does is you can suggest changes till the cows come home, so to speak, but they don't get reflected in the document. They go off to the side. And therefore we can go through those, I think, fairly rapidly and accept or reject those to get to the final document Thursday night. Okay? and then that gives us an online document to put forward. Yes, sir.
Point of information on Sassenfeld SD 29. Did we get a ruling on that it is going to be 15 that we submit?
We have not, but I rode the elevator down with Chairman Cruz, and we talked about it. He thinks we are okay in that regard. He was more concerned about how he and I do the presentation on Saturday. So, he thinks we're okay on that, but we haven't got final word on it. Good point. Okay, so the three different groups will work on the wording, and I'll reiterate this right before we break up, after we've kind of gone around the horn. We are not legislating. We want to make this as short and as concise and as to the point as we can. We want to make it clear what we want, not how to do it. If you want to think about it kind of in those terms. You know, tell them what we want to do, not how to do it. And to me, the red meat language is okay, short of naming elected officials in the actual legislative priority, if you will. And then we'll try to get Paul and Walton as soon as we can on the Zoom call. Yes, Mike.
Mr. Chairman, point of information, so the Word document you sent out last night, is that the document we're working from right now, sir?
Yes, correct. And as y'all are going around the table, I'll try to finish up the next round of voting to try to knock that out real quick, to condense it all the way down to 15. Okay? Everybody clear? Yes, sir. Actually, I guess I would need a motion to reduce it down to 15.
What are we gonna do about the 2 o'clock in SRC?
Those of us that are in the SREC meeting, if we are not, there's 3 of us, well, Walter's not here yet. There's 3 of us, or who am I missing? Okay, I'm sorry, you're on my right, yeah, sorry. There's 4 of us. We will, as we've done, that's what it is. We will, as we've done in the past, if the committee is still going on, we will have to go to that SREC meeting, and then we'll come back if the committee hasn't finished up. I'm hoping like crazy we'll be finished up by then, but that would be amazingly optimistic to actually think that. But we'll just have to do that. I mean, it is what it is at that point. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, Sean Chief, SD 17, would now be an appropriate time for me to bring up Addison Lanyard to the temporary report, or is that okay? The extra file.
Oh, yeah, sure.
This will end up as a motion, I'm sure, but one thing we did 2 years ago on this committee that I think engendered a lot of great discussion with our SD caucuses was not only did we include the top 5 priorities that were going to be formally recommended to the permanent committee, but we also included the top 3 that didn't make it, to show our SDs and the body as a whole kind of the quality of those priorities that made it versus those that did not. I think right now that's not in the cards, but I would propose, I'll make a motion to that now, that we include the 5 also ranks, so priority ranked 16 through 20 to be included with the temporary report, but explicitly marked as not in the top 15, just to engender that kind of conversation as we report back to our SDs.
Can we call that the report line out? Is that what it was? Okay.
Bring it into the page.
Okay, it was a precedent started 2 years ago. You've heard the motion. Any debate on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion carries. Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion that once we add a few things back in, that we take our vote and go with the top 15 at that point?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Janera. Yes, Terry.
Question, did we ever get the rule from the Rules Committee concerning the number?
Not yet, but I did talk to Virgil. He thinks we're okay, but it's not a final vote yet.
Okay, I got that from some of the committee members.
So they think we're okay too?
Thank you.
Okay, that's good. Okay, it's been moved by Janera that our next vote will be after we potentially add something back in, if any, that will be calling down, en masse to 15 to tweak the wording on. Do we have any discussion on that? Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Shelby Williams, SB8. For clarification, does that mean we're supposed to be further culling within our subcommittee groups or find language and then bring it back down here for a total?
No, not within the groups. This will be, you remember, we basically recognized that there were two on overreach of government right now. We kind of automatically culled that down by one, if you will. I'm going to put all the remaining ones into a Survey Monkey vote, and we'll take the top 15 out of that.
That clears up, thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir.
On Sassonville SD 29, since we have the two abortion priorities, and there are definitely, you know, we could pull everybody right now, be split 50-50. My concern is what happens when that does go forward as either two, and then gets split by the delegates and doesn't get selected, or we select two, which looks like it's confusing. And I've thought about this a lot since 2 years ago when we had the same battle. Looking at the very first one, the one that says abolish abortion, the thing that is most, where I have the hardest problem is refuse to enforce all federal statutes, regulations, orders, and court rulings. I would make a motion, since that is not the, in other words, we can't tell the legislature to tell the governor to not enforce something, that if we take that language out, that the two then could be wordsmithed together in the subcommittee or whatever, and we come up with one abortion program. That's my motion, that we combine those two into one by removing the one thing that the legislature can.
I'm going to rule that out of order at this point. That might be something for y'all to consider and hammer out in just a few minutes. But that's not happening. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, if we will start, and Mr. Stringer didn't come in yet, we'll try to get the Zoom meeting up and running as we start. If we can start down with Marty, and oh, there is a Zoom. If Walt, well, I'm not sure. Let's send him an email. I'm not sure we want everybody trying to log into Zoom. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, JR.
how are we publishing the Zoom for delegates to be aware?
All in, I guess y'all can send it out, and I'll post it as well. So it'll kind of go out on mostly social media.
And, sorry, one other question. I think at some point, kind of back to the last comment, I think it's the will of both on the life issue. I think it's everyone's in agreement that we want to sell on one of them, and I think both agree they don't want to merge that. So I don't know if that's something we want to try to tackle. I would suppose it's something we tackle as a larger body.
Well, and y'all may decide in sub, I guess they're both in that same committee. Y'all, you know, yeah, it's still better to keep them separate to bring it to the full body. You know, I would be almost surprised if y'all don't do that. And that's not trying to direct you one way or another.
Mr. Chairman?
Hang on, there is one other thing I will note. I do not see Mr. Dale Inman in the room. I'm not sure if he will be here or not. There was a request by Walter West yesterday that came in that the committee would vote him off the committee in favor of voting Dale Inman on the committee in his place. I have no objection to that. I know when it does arrive, I'll bring that up again, but just to let y'all know that's a possibility.
I'm a little unclear on the schedule, Rich DeISD 9. I'm a little unclear on the schedule. We're going to break up and reformat. If we're going to be taking items that have been removed, that we still have?
No, no, not any of the items will be removed. Sorry, I didn't.
Okay, so there, let me just give you an example of the 10-day rule. I think there's some arguments to put that back on the list that are pretty powerful. Is there gonna be an opportunity for
This round would be the time to bring that back up.
Okay, so if someone brings it up, does it have to be voted on, be put back on the list?
Well, that would then be in the permanent committee. Okay, so we're gonna go around, we're gonna try to put anything else back on the list now.
Right.
Okay, obviously, we've got, that would sponsor that one. We'll vote it up or down here,
Right.
and if it gets voted down here, then the next opportunity would be at the permanent committee meeting on Thursday night. Okay, and at that point, it would be a substitute for something else that's already on the list.
All right, so it's up to this round that we're gonna do to, if we're gonna bring something.
Correct. Okay, and it's just a response to COVID, if you will, and trying to get everybody back for the SDs tomorrow. Okay? So with that, let's see, Marty's not here. Paul, would you like to direct the speaking while I can work on I would just,
I don't have a list of everybody's name, but I can do that, I'll just say SD.
you just go by SD number, that's right, okay?
If we hand up.
Yes, thank you, Shelby Williams, SDA. For clarity, which Zoom meeting is it intended for Paul and Walt to dial into? Yours or Walt's?
No, it'll be the RPT one.
The RPT's here? Okay.
Yeah,
Then we'll wait for that link. That one first.
okay.
Okay, SD1.
If you have, good morning.
Doesn't know what to do. You want to see the code? He's gonna send, Mark is sending it out. He doesn't want-
Nobody in the room has to worry about the Zoom meeting right now. We're gonna set that, we're gonna go ahead and get started. They're watching this live stream. We're gonna go ahead and get started while I send the link to Paul and Walt. Okay?
Mr. Chairman, because people weren't speaking loud enough in the microphones.
Okay, everyone try to get close to the microphone so the camera can pick it up. Thank you. Especially.
Chairman, are we still waiting on the reader?
Promises made.
Okay, we'll wait for the burritos to come around.
Can you hear me?
Not the burritos, don't get excited.
And SD1, you can give us give us your impressions of where we are and if something's fallen off. What's your passion about?
I do not see the shared parenting in here. Is it still? It's still in here? That's one thing, okay,
We would like it here still.
not anything particular, just
Sorry, everybody's eating. Take a one more minute break before we really get started, and then we'll talk about it.
Thank you. We'll put it on hold.
Yeah.
Got a little interruption.
for my prayers for this committee. And I think I've gotten to know a little bit, many of you. I've spent time working and talking to people. And I just appreciate your service and your meetings, and your kindness to each other and to me. And I think that's been good. And also, the way the question has gone with the delegates has been excellent too. So thank you for all of that. SDI, SD9. I put a chart on your, you all have a copy of this in front of you, and I'd like you to take it up while you're eating breakfast, if you would. I'm going to go through some history here, because here's, when you make a decision between the Texas abolition strategy, which I do support, and pure only abolition, there's a cost. Now, we've heard mostly the cost associated with the TAS, but what we haven't heard, at least to my hearing, is the very real cost with not choosing TAS instead. So I want to make an argument for TAS as the preferred strategy to do this. Now, this chart shows a few things that I want to point out. Everything in red is the deployment of a drug or some treatment. Everything in blue, pointing at the chart, is legislation that has passed. Along the bottom, you've got a list of abortion clinics, and that's the number of clinics that were open in Texas at any given time. And then I want to tell you what this chart means. Now, we started in 1973. We cruised into the Roe decision with some abortions occurring already. At that point, there were some states that allowed abortion, but it became nationwide in 1973 by Roe. Then the numbers dramatically increased to a total of about 80,000, about 90,000 during Ann Richards' governorship. And then it started to kind of flutter a little bit. And if you look at the right end of that chart, there's a very significant drop. Culturally speaking, we fight this battle on cultural lines, and we fight this battle on legislative lines. And those go together. So when you look at other states that also show a declining curve, even though they may be much more blue than Texas is, that's the cultural impact of the things that we're doing. Our message is getting out to some degree, not enough. But on the legislative side, in Texas is different. So Texas chart does look different than other states because of our philosophy, our culture, and our laws. If you look, the pill was deployed in the 60s, yet we had a massive increase in abortions once it was made legal. And by the way, these are just the numbers of abortion. The population of Texas is growing a lot. So the rate of abortion actually is decreasing from about 80, 81. I don't have that chart. I don't think it's needed that y'all understand. We got parental consent in 2005. This was an incremental change. Not sure that made any difference in this chart. Informed consent. A man was tried in the session before, and that's very significant to this, implemented in 2011, and then in 2013, we were in Austin watching the filibuster by Wendy Davis. And they crammed all three bills that they had been working on into one bill and passed it at that time. Governor Perry was going to run for president. David Dewhurst was going to be running for Senate. There's a lot of political motivation to get this done. But I want you to look at the numbers and see what caused that very significant drop to happen. One of the arguments that I get from the pure-only abolitionists is those are pharmaceutical abortions. I don't believe those are pharmaceutical abortions, although those are a problem. In fact, my wife and I filed a lawsuit a year and a half ago in May, 2 years ago. No, it was a year and a half in December. Against the Trump administration to end the contraception mandate in Obamacare. Diop versus Azar is that lawsuit. You can Google it, and I've been doxxed because of that. Our lawsuit resulted in a nationwide injunction against the enforcement of the contraception mandate in Obamacare. It almost made it without appeal, but the state of Nevada appealed. The appeals court got it, started working on it, but then shelved it because the Trump administration just this last week won their lawsuit.
Time's up.
Pardon me.
I make a motion to extend the time.
Can I have just one more sentence?
I second that motion.
I'm sorry, can I have we've given a little grace. I'd like just 2 more sentences.
Without objection, sure.
If we had Ann Richards' abortion rate today, we would have 140,000 abortions in Texas, but we'll have about 54. That's a savings of 86,000 lives. So if you go with a strategy that cannot do anything now, it will be incremental. If you go with pure only abolition, you go, I'm not going to walk away from those 86,000 lives. I understand the motivation and all of that, but I am not going to walk away from saving 86,000 lives a year in Texas because of incrementalism. Thank you.
Questions? Chair? J.R. Haas, SD7.
Yes.
Oh, there's the chair. All right, Rich, thank you for your testimony. And I, like you, appreciate you and thank you for your work and sacrifice on behalf of life. So a couple questions. The first is, are you aware that both in Texas and New York, over the same time period between 2005 and 2020, we're seeing declines in states where we're implementing pro-life legislation and versus states where we're actually seeing deregulation of it?
I am, yes, and I've studied that.
Okay. So text to say, can we really, be certain that it is in fact the pro-life legislation that's causing the decline if we're seeing in other states the same kind of decline?
Texas is special because if you look at the right part of that chart, the sonogram by itself, I believe, saved 30,000 lives a year.
Okay.
And I think that's, what else would it be? And again, I keep an open mind as I talk with y'all, because where you're going, that's where I want to get to. I just don't think your plan will work.
So I'm glad you said that. So, because the third step in the Texas Abolitionist Strategy says abolition, but as I understand it, what you mean by abolition and what you call the pure abolitionist strategy, I think are 2 different goal lines, and here's why. And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm trying to speak to it, you correct it. So I think the Texas Abolitionist Strategy is really just basically removing the rights of physicians to help women assist in the termination of that life. Whereas the abolitionist strategy is making it illegal or we're saying we want to make it illegal, having the legislators pass a law to make it outlawed. What the abolitionist strategies or abolish abortion is doing is literally saying that all life from conception now has equal protection under the law. So my question is, after TAS is fully implemented and you abolish abortion in your third step, not yours, but the Texas Abolitionist Strategy, what protection does the preborn child have from their mother prior to, heartbeat, or from conception to, where typical medical abortions are?
I'm not sure I understood this specific question.
Let me make it shorter, sorry. So once we've implemented and abolished it on your third step, I believe that is literally just removing the physician's right to help the mother terminate the pregnancy, correct?
I'll be honest with you, I don't think that's true, but I'm not positive. I think, see, abortion right now in the code, the abortion laws are still on the books. They've never been removed. It is a crime to commit abortion. Still, we just can't enforce it.
Well,
the reason I say that is I think and I've talked to Bradley Pierce about this too. I think, as I understand, the last step is to remove the exception. I don't know if y'all knew this. Abortion is illegal in Texas. Or I'm sorry, killing a preborn baby is illegal in Texas, except for abortion. That's how the law is written.
Correct.
So I believe we would just remove the exception.
I love that position, because that's actually what HB 896 does, the law that's already written and been brought forward. It literally goes to Texas Penal Code, Chapter 19, subsection 6 is what you're referring to,
Right.
where we do see life protected from conception, but mothers and those assisting the mothers have an exemption to now continue to terminate without recourse. So that is the position of abolishing abortion. My question is, I think you wouldn't remove the full exemption, you would just remove the exemption for the doctors and those that are assisting the mother. The mother would still be protected to terminate their child really up till birth.
I would support language that remove the exception.
I'd love to hear that.
And I think that can be worked out, but here's the thing.
Sounds like I won his vote.
No, you didn't come close, because how long do you think it's going to take? And I don't know if I can ask a question back, but when pure only abolition,
Technically, no, but without objection, I mean, this is.
We're-
Yeah.
No, it's very important. I want you to understand. I support abolition and the people that are here working. I didn't appreciate the name callers that emailed me after the last convention, but honest brokers on any issue I will deal with all the time, and I love these guys. I'm sorry, what was it? Oh, I was going to ask you. Okay, so do you think abolition is going to happen in the legislature this year?
So, I think absolutely. And that's why I pushed for it. Because I think likewise, if we put both on the table, both are just, I would actually say abolition is more likely, because the plan for Texas abolition strategy is contingent on a court that's progressively more liberal. And we're like really waiting for that court to admit they're wrong. And everything we've sent to the federal court has one litmus test. Does it cause any undue burden on women to terminate the pregnancy? And I'm saying we can't continue. The court's told us that outright, and that's been their measure for every case that's come before them. So, and we've already demonstrated that there's been cases recently brought before the federal courts. So there's, even in the first step of the Texas abolition strategy, that's dead on arrival. Like, we already know the outcome. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome. So why, now that we've packaged pre-NDA into the Texas abolition strategy, and I know you're showing the numbers, and I want to see bills that would come through, but I don't think we have any certainty that that we're going to see a pre-NDA bill get passed, because you're complying with the court.
My response to that, when you say we keep doing the same thing and getting the same result, which is nothing, this is not nothing. There are 86,000 lives every year that live today because of incrementalism, cultural changes, and legislative changes. And in Texas, this proves that legislation does matter.
And we have 55,000 that continue to be murdered every year, right?
Absolutely. And that number, if you look, and the flat line at the end of that, where we hit 54,000 and pretty much leveled off, that's very significant to why that happened. I won't spend a lot of time on that, but it basically proves that the incremental approach does save lives. Now, the question is, can we pass a law now that just abolishes abortion? Makes everybody involved a criminal, including the woman, which is what they're going to focus on. And I tell you, I got 2% in our SD committee. You go out in the general population or half the legislature, which is Democrat, see how you're not going to get that passed. That's not a plan to get passed. I don't think you're right. I don't think straight abolition passes. I think this gets through hearings and could pass. That's why I think it's an important priority.
So I agree.
JR, we're in a debate right now.
Okay,
There are some other people that like to speak.
All right, let me finish two things. I believe we will get it passed, and then it's going nowhere. So the last question is, so when we pass it, my question is, where is, if we believe life begins at conception, what is the protection for the children that are still at risk of being terminated through unassisted abortions? I mean, there's still no protection when you've abolished abortion and Texas abolition strategy. There's still no protection for these children from conception at all from their mother, correct?
Correct. One of the things that gets me respect for a lot of people in the abolition movement is I see them in front of clinics begging those women, please do not let them kill your baby. And they're out there, they're serious about it, and they're out there pleading, but they can't save them all. That is a rescue operation, and I believe culturally we're still in the phase where we have to be rescuing who we can. There's been a catastrophe, and we can't figure out a law to go and try to save lives during hurricane recovery, for example. We're going to recover and rescue who we can, and that's what we're doing. That's philosophically, I think, where our biggest difference is. We're in a rescue operation right now.
Chair recognizes Marty, SD two.
Yes, Richard, you keep pointing out the 86,000. What makes you think we're going to go back up? I mean, to me, the best thing the legislature did was the sonogram law, because that has now got science on our side. So we're already where you're at on that map. Why do you think?
Why aren't we at the point of abolition now?
We're not going to go back to 86. Are you saying you think it's going to increase by 86,000 if we go with abolition abortion?
No, I'm saying that incremental steps have brought us to this point so far. And look, yeah, let me ask that. So there are a lot of examples in history. We started off in 1992 with the gun law, and now we're talking about constitutional character. Through those steps, we've changed the mindset of the culture and gotten people to a point where they understand and they're not afraid of it. I mean, people, I'll bet you there's more guns in this room than there is at gun school right now. So that's one example. Slavery. Any hands on that? Slavery is another good example because we fought a war here, but we were making incremental advances until abolitionists got too aggressive and they started to kill the progress. And we ended up in a war because of that. That's the way I interpret this.
Well, I think we're going to end up in a war either way. When the Supreme Court of the United States overrules Roe versus Wade, the left is going to go nuts.
That's true, but if we got a lot more people on our side.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We're winning the culture. The sonogram law put science on our side clearly, and that's where you see the biggest dip on your chart.
Yeah, exactly.
Because now people see it's not just a glob; it's a baby.
Right.
So I don't
Well,
think.
let me explain. In England, they didn't have a law, but they ended slavery. What they did is they started in the outer colonies, and they limited it in the outer colonies. Then they affected the shipping lanes, transporting slaves. And then one day, when Wilberforce was in the legislature and looked around, they had a plan, and nobody was there to vote. They took the vote, and that's how he won it. So there's a little trickery involved there, which I'm a fan of doing that if you can. But my point is that there is not a case in human history, except when a king issues an edict, where a legislative body makes a wholesale change all at once. It never happens. And I'm afraid if we take this step with pure only abolition, if Texas turns blue, you ask me, or if you're asking me whether I think we're going to start giving back some of those 86,000 lives, absolutely, if we turn blue.
Okay, I would agree with that. If we turn blue, yes, we'll add to that number, but I don't think we're comparing apples to apples. I think it's apples and oranges. I mean, I think you're going to end up, and nobody wants a war, but we have done incremental forever, and to me, it's time to take that next step. And we talked about earlier, you're not always going to get what you ask for, but you better ask for what you want. And for me, I'm wore out with incrementalism. We've done it for years and years and years, and I'm happy with the results. Your chart proves, like I've always said, sonograms are the best thing the legislature ever did because it now puts science on our side. We got it out there in the open where everybody can see it. But at some point, we gotta say enough is enough. It is time to abolish abortion in Texas. If we wanna quit fighting God in the public realm, we have got to honor and respect life. And we may not get it in this next legislative session, but we gotta tell them that's what we want. That's what the grassroots want. We want abortion abolished in Texas.
Well, you and I are making different calculations. And by the way, you make a good point. This chart proves that we've done some good here. And by the way, that's you all. That's not over on the other side, the Democrats. That's people like people in this room. You have saved 86,000 lives, both on the cultural side and the legislative side. If we make a choice today to abandon what has done this in favor of something that there is not anything on the horizon that I believe we get through the legislature on this at all, if I can finish, then I think you're going to throw it away. And at some point, I can tell you, I've been down there when these discussions have happened. I think what this will do is give the legislature something to ignore at this point. I wish that wasn't the case, but it says, look, you all know, you can see the numbers. There's no way we can pass this, and I'm not going to walk the plank and carry this. We've also done that before, and I think that's the problem. Is this is a binary choice. We're going to go one direction, or we're going to go another. And the way that's been working, and to some great effect, we're saving more than half of the abortions by far as a result of our incremental approach. So I know it's tiring. It's a long battle, but we have to stay the course so that we don't see it turn around.
Chairman, it's
Chairman.
Marty, can we move it on?
Can I finish one more? I think the way we turn Texas blue is when we don't project our beliefs to the legislature, right? I mean, I'm in agreement with you that
Marty,
The
you have a question, I'd like to move it along. It sounds like we're debating again.
We'll do this later.
Chairman, you have a question then? I think we hand that over to Janera, and we'll move over here.
Janera Lewis, SD 27. Good morning, sir, and thank you for your work. I wanted to address JR's question about, or comments about the parallels between the reduction in abortions between Texas and New York. They have the progressive legislation, and we have more conservative legislation. And should we not have fewer abortions, or should they have more? I guess what I'm asking here is, we know that the Texas population has exploded. Do we know what's been going on in New York? What kind of population issues, or is their population decreasing?
Their growth rate is very flat.
Okay, so I know,
Lately it's been negative.
my understanding is many people have fled New York, like they're fleeing California, and that may be the explanation, especially in the young people who would be having abortions for their parallel abortion levels.
Right.
Is that possible?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
I think JR has the counterpoint.
Okay.
I do. Chair recognizes.
Shelby.
Philip, thank you.
Shelby, sorry. Shelby Williams, SB8, assuming it was me you were recognizing?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your position on this, Rich. I've got a couple of questions. First, and I was reading Texas Abolition Strategy as a printout that was given to us yesterday. It says, we call for the heartbeat bill and abolition bill in the bill. What's the actual strategy legislatively and in the courts in putting it all in one bill that could be stricken simultaneously? We already heard testimony that heartbeat bills are being shot down all over the place. So if the idea were to one session pass one bill, and then the next session pass another bill, a truly incremental approach, I might understand that approach, even if I wasn't on board with it. But what's the strategy in putting them all in a single bill, which can be passed or vetoed and stricken down by a court or upheld?
That is a very, very good question. I was hoping that the Texas Abolition Strategy, and I still have this hope, and I really think it will happen, will sort of bring these factions together, because there are people who are very ambitious about heartbeat last time. It got put in a committee with a coat hanger holding Democrat. And it didn't go any. As I think about this, the main question is this: what if Texas passes a bill that's the end of this path is abolition? Part of the problem with Heartbeat, for example, is that when you look down the road at Heartbeat, what happens when we pass that? A lot of people are going to think, and I know this room is more educated than this and pays more attention to these things than others, but what's going to happen if we pass Heartbeat? People are going to think that's when life begins. Is that when life begins? No, it begins at conception. And if you do that, you're going to drain off a lot of political support for anything beyond Heartbeat for a long time. So I had a few problems approaching it philosophically that way because I thought it would kill the whole movement. What this strategy does, it puts Heartbeat the backstop. Heartbeat is there, but we're saying we're going for abolition because that has to happen. And I think one of the effects of this is we put abolition on the map by doing this a lot quicker than we do if we say, yes, we're going to do that, and we want to put anyone who has an abortion in jail or prosecutor according to law or whatever they say. The culture's not ready for that. They will reject it. Most Republicans are going to reject that right now. But what this does is it puts, the Texas abolition strategy puts abolition on the map in law.
I've got a couple more questions, if I may.
Go ahead.
Okay. The sonogram law was cited a couple of times. Looking at 3 different charts. One is the one you provided showing the number of abortion clinics. Another one over the same time period from the modern history peak, which is 2000, looking at the same period right here, where the modern history peak, raw abortion numbers and abortion rates. The decline started fully 4 years before the sonogram law, and between the point between the start of the decline and the plateau that is shown here, half of the decline had occurred before the sonogram law. So how can the sonogram law be attributable to the decline, especially when we've seen the same decline? I only saw the New York numbers by contrast. But
Right. My answer to that is you're telling half the story. Going back to 2005,
it's not my story.
the story that's being expressed there, it only tells half the story, and that's important because of what we've been doing. Now, I didn't say the sonogram law was responsible for all of that. But I was saying, now, first of all, there's a little, you get something close to passion and it doesn't pass that, and everybody knows that, know you're coming back. They fight their elections, we come back with an election, and then we pass the sonogram. So there's a little bit of precedent activity in there, in my opinion. But you've got parental consent, you've got informed consent, you've got these other things that are going along with it. We're constantly keeping this issue in the legislature, constantly keeping this discussion going on in the public realm.
The chair recognizes the chair, and we're almost 30 minutes into this.
Okay?
Yeah, I'm going to shut down this particular delegate testimony. I'm sure we'll revisit it a little bit later in the day. We do have the Survey Monkey document ready, but first I do want to give you all the opportunity to try to, with Marty down at the end, check to see if anybody wants to try to get one more in before we vote. Okay?
When do you want the list of elected officials willing to carry certain bills?
I'm just using the honor system here. Okay, that's a logistical thing after convention even, but I'm asking that you not try to present something for addition unless you personally know that they're willing to carry those bills. Okay?
If anybody's curious, I've got elected officials want to carry something.
Awesome. Okay.
There's a lot of items that, of course, I think are priorities, but I understand that we have to get them supportive of, and I don't really see any that I would say we could, just like the bond or the bail. I'm sure that is very important to a few people, but I don't see that as being a major issue that I can add to it at this time.
I think the way you worded it, I can't say much. I'm really happy with the list, you know, I think all of them are great. I was really hoping you could put, no public gun-free zones in there, that's more personal. I don't know that I can get my, legislator to carry that.
Well, would constitutional carry cover that?
Does that get rid of all?
Well, I'm debating, I'm sorry.
It was.
I hope you're right.
Paulette Carson, SD3. I'm like Marty, I'm actually very pleased with the current list that made the cut, because that really encompasses a lot of what SD3 was looking for. So that's the good news. There is one that I think I would like to mention, but I cannot state that I have approached my legislators to sign on to that. So I'll withhold that item this time. Thank you.
Madeline Lucier, SD5. Everything that was the top priority for SD5 made the list, except I do need to speak to one. We abolished the 10-day rule, didn't make the list, and there was a person from my Senate district that testified, so I'd like to see that back in the list.
Keith Nielsen, SB6. I've learned to appreciate all the work that this body does. You know, first convention I went to, I didn't realize all the work that went on behind the scenes. 2016, I was platform committee, we added the abortion to the platform. Just want to make a quick comment on that. I have a goal to take back Harris County and take back Congress, not an incremental approach to taking back Congress, but a goal to reach that, not a goal to get halfway through. So, thank you.
J.R. Haas, SD7. I'd like to propose to bring in, I don't know if we had it in originally, but Tom Ollerson has legislation on transparency and medical costs. I'd like us to add that back, or at least consider it.
Shelby Williams, SD8, everything that I heard expressed by my constituents is covered.
You're very successful.
Rich Scott, SD9, 26 Senate districts forwarded the repeal of the 10-day law, so I'd like to see that added back.
Jesse Taylor, in District SD10. Yesterday, I said it, I listened to everybody's testimony, and I heard various, and I agree with a lot of them. You know, parenting rights, special abortion. I mean, before I became a Republican, I knew Republicans stood firm on abortions, so it's not a surprise for me. But what I didn't see yesterday was something that our president has gotten a lot of attention for, especially when it comes to my community and the people that wants to try to support him. And one of the things that he mentioned a lot, and I know everybody heard about it, is criminal justice reform.
Amen.
Amen.
I heard no one speak yesterday about criminal justice reform. No one. And we sit here, we're talking about keeping people out of jail. Well, how do we do that? We do that by here. We do that. This is where it starts. But I heard no one mention that yesterday. I heard even about putting ladies in jail that have abortion. You know, I heard about putting some folks in jail, but I didn't hear a whole lot about keeping folks out of jail. And that's what our president is preaching right now. It's criminal justice reform. So one thing that I brought up, especially with the Sandra Bland Act, that should have been on the list. And even,
I'm sorry, I want to add.
I would like, that's Central Plan, okay, but at least, like, in my culture, we can do something about just decriminalizing, maybe so let's decriminalize, but at least let cannabis a Class C misdemeanor. You know how many people we could keep out of jail if we just do that? If we just do that out of this, you mentioned Arch, you talking about increments, this abortion thing. I mean, to get the abortion abolished, okay? Well, this is like an increment to keep people in my culture out of jail. People like when they go through, I know Walsh, he told me, he said they set a budget of $40,000 coming through their town. The police department set a budget of $40,000. And this is when people come through their town and they might have drugs or whatever the case may be. Or they might just get stopped with a joint. And they get pulled over. And then their town gets all kind of revenue from it. And it destroys people's lives over a small amount of marijuana. So I would ask that I'm coming here from Fort Worth. And I wouldn't be right to go back to Fort Worth and I try to do something for my people, try to keep them out of jail. So if we could, let's at least put that back on the list to try to keep people out of jail by making cannabis a Class C misdemeanor. Thank you.
Before you continue, Pastor Dale Inman has arrived. He's the gentleman that Walter West spoke with me about replacing him on the committee. We don't allow proxy voting on committees, but without objection, we can take Walter off the committee and put Dale in his place. Do I hear any objection or discussion? All in favor, aye. Aye. All opposed, nay.
Nay.
You're outvoted. Okay, Dale, welcome to the committee. You want to give you a brief introduction? 30 seconds.
Use the mic.
Well, as far as background, I'm a pastor. I also teach for Southwest Baptist Theological Seminary. I also work for TDCJ in the rehab program division. I was SD4 convention chair 2 years ago in Montgomery County. I've been a precinct chair for 15 years. Best thing that ever happened. Politically was I ran against Brandon Creighton for HD 16, 2004 and lost. So I'm very happy that Brandon won. Thank you very much, West Texas.
Julie?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Julie Pickering, SD11. I'm very pleased and thankful for this group. And, you know, this is my first time here with you all. And boy, what I can say, what an honor. It's just the power inside this room, the passion and the love for God and the love for our country. It's just amazing. I'm very proud to say that the top 3 from my SD have made the survivors list. Due process, abolish abortion, and constitutional carry are very important to my SD. So I'm very thankful to God that they made it. So I guess what I want to say right now is I would ask for y'all in the coming session in 87, I would ask for y'all support for a bill, for legislation that's coming forward. It has support in the Senate and in the House. It has both chambers, and it is for concerning education. In my district alone, there are over 70 different dialects and languages in my district. I have one elementary school that has over 50 languages and dialects in it. People are not just moving here from New York and California, they're moving here from all over the world. And then part of the Texas Constitution is it is our duty in public education to create and to educate future citizens, to make great citizens. So my concern right now is that we're educating them, we're providing a great education, and I'm proud to say in my school district, we say both pledges every morning to the flag, the American flag and to the Texas flag. But we have a problem in Texas overall, so now I'm talking statewide, okay? We have a problem that a very large percentage of kids who are graduating school cannot pass a U.S. citizenship test. They're here, they're being educated here, but they do not know U.S. history, and they don't know Texas history. So there is legislation coming forward that has support in both high school. They must be able to pass a U.S. citizenship test.
Yay.
Okay, so whenever y'all see that legislation come forward in 87, I would appreciate it if y'all can contact your senators and reps and, provide more support. Thank you. And God bless
You want to
Texas.
try to add that one to the list?
I think, honestly, right now, I think that it's already got so much support. Okay, and I think that it is so narrow in scope. I mean, I'm gonna go at your discretion,
No, that's fine.
but I think it's narrow in scope. I think that
I don't think I'll start at C12. I've been making a list all week of what my top 15 would be, and I saw some empty spots. One of the ones that are on here that I think we should put back, there's actually two, I'll speak to both of them briefly, is Jesse brought up one, is decriminalizing marijuana, and I know that it's a touchy subject to a lot of people, and part of what I think we need to understand is decriminalization is not endorsement. It's not we're saying, hey, we think everybody should go do this, but 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, this time and again, will go out there and all of a sudden now they have a criminal record because they were in possession of marijuana, and then they have a hard time getting jobs. They have a hard time having a normal life after that because they have a criminal record. It's just wrong. I think that doing something small like that could have a huge impact on the long-term, individual life of individuals. Crime rates, income, when people have poverty. Sorry, I heard Jesse talk. I didn't get a chance to get my thoughts together too much, but I was just like, Jesse's right. We need to do this. And I know it's a hot topic, but I just added it to my list just now because I think it's something we need to put back. Something I have put a little more thought into is the 10-day rule. It's just absolutely abhorrent that right now medical doctors can override at the wishes of family members. So that, and I was actually thinking about that comment this morning because I have an 18-year-old dog that I just had to put down. It was sad. But it's actually worse because not one time did that vet ever override my wishes. So right now, we basically have something codified in law that devalues human life less than my vet devalued my dog's life. We have medical doctors coming in and saying, I don't care what you want, family member, X, Y, or Z, we think we know what's best, we're going to terminate this patient. And you have no say. And we know this patient can have a written will, we don't care. You can throw it in the trash, we know what's best. That is a party, it should be important to us as a party as a whole, and I definitely think it should be a priority, because it is as much taking a life as abortion is, in my opinion, so it definitely needs to be a priority. Thank you.
Gene Pike, SD 13. My passion, Mr. Chairman, is in line with the two speakers who have spoken before me. Jesse and I, in our community, do have a strong need for prison reform. And that's one that I'm actively working on right now. Because of having two liberal Democrats as my representatives, I've had to go into another area and work with another state rep, and that's State Rep James White. And he's willing to carry he's willing to carry anything that we would need to get that done. It's a atrocity in our community, and I want to see change in it. I thank the president for what he's done and what he's continued to do. And people whether you know it or not, the president is making inroads into the African American. It's growing, he's keep doing, he has to stay the course on what he's doing. And I'm hoping that we can get our representatives here in Texas to follow in this path.
Quick question,
Yes.
Gene. If we limited it to the issue, I guess, that Jesse brought up on, making small amounts of marijuana possession, Class C, would that be maybe an appropriate step toward that?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. It'd be a huge impact because, as mentioned before, many young people right now are walking around smoking marijuana, and it's just like drinking water to them. Days past, I've seen this happening while I was in Vietnam. Yes, I participated too. But I'm saying now that it's something that I don't know how we can pull out of these young people's hands, but we really need to try to control it and see if we can get them to more or less be able to do it in proportions or whatever, without the criminal intent being locked up for minor issues now. Here in Harris County, I think it was, they allowed for 4 ounces of marijuana to be, they get a ticket behind it. Do you know the size of 4 ounces of marijuana? That's a lot. That's a heck of a lot. But, so maybe, I don't know how we could go about wording and making that.
Justin, I'll note that the subcommittee on justice and the other things that they're doing, a consolidated due process plan that is still in which contemplates ending jailing for low-level offenses, where cannabis and perhaps other things could be added if that subcommittee so chooses. And I would, of course, advocate for it as well, if that's the route that they want to take. Other than that, Chairman, there are plenty of things I would like to see as legislative priorities, but I respect that the votes we've taken thus far have yielded some pretty good options for us to move forward with. And in the interest of time, I will respectfully decline to suggest adding anything else. And I yield.
Gail's not back in here. Oh, yeah. Gail's not back in here.
Yeah, in this case, SD 16, Gail said that she didn't have anything before she's on call.
Okay.
And I just wanted to add that, for the 10-day rule, we had, 25 different SDs that included that as a priority. So I would second the fact that that's something that we really need to consider, putting back in.
Which one?
10-day rule.
Sean Chesney, 17. All of our high priority items did get in, but there was a medium priority item which was strengthening the Texas healthcare system. So I would advocate along with JR that we re-add the transparency health point around pricing and so forth. Thank you.
Paul Yamrick, SB 18. I'm very happy with where we are today. Our highest priorities are there. I always talk about education. I think school choice is very important for a lot of reasons. So I'm really happy with that. I would probably go down to, I've done some heavy lifting with fiscal responsibility. I'd like to think Republicans are a very important principle is fiscal responsibility. The zero-based budgeting, dig it in there, we use that wording. One that fell off that I'd like for you to consider is the chapter 312 and 313. With the exemptions going on, if we not exempt taxes on specific operations by schools and like counties and all, we wouldn't build this fiscal mess. Everybody could pay the same rate and it would be equal. Glenn Hager, I've talked to him a number of times, he was at our SB quarterly meeting. He said, if you want to do something, get passed. Now, that's not a legislature, and I don't know who's going to pick it up, but I want to bring up the point mostly about fiscal responsibility. We are Republicans, we do stand for that. So, thank you for everyone. I'm very happy to.
Thank you, Marion Knowlton, SD 19. I think we've developed a pretty comprehensive list here. My Senate district is quite vast, 17 counties. Geographically, I think it's the largest in the state. Might be one other. The folks in the western part, southwestern part of Texas are freedom-loving folks. They're liberty-minded folks. These constitutional carry is important to them. Abolish abortion is important to them. And one of the things that has come up, and I think that my predecessor on this committee, Jack DuBose, who's from Rayon County, he sat on this committee a couple of years ago, and he did a fine job in developing some of the things that are here now because of his efforts. One of the issues that was addressed to me was the conduct of our elected officials. We've had an incident in our Senate district where an official was caught with some narcotic, and it really set a bad taste in our mouth because to my knowledge, or to their knowledge, nothing's been done about it. And so one of their priorities and resolutions was to have our elected officials held accountable for their actions. And I think that we've approached that in one of these under elected official ethics. And that might be a start. But I think that's important that the officials that we elect be accountable for their actions just as we are all accountable for the things that we do. So I throw that out there to you. I think that we have begun that under this item 6 under elected official ethics, but we may just be scratching the surface on that, and we may be needing to go further in that regard. But otherwise, I thank you for your efforts. I think we are moving forward, and I look forward to completing this project. Thank you all.
Hello, everyone. Aaron Pena, SD 20, Hidalgo County. That was my first time on legislative priorities. I want to thank you all for all the hard work and the long hours that we put into winding down this list. From SD 20, we did get equal parenting, emergency powers, touched on property taxes, and issues of life. And ethics on elected officials are really big issues in our community. As well, I'd like to add to the joining sentiment of the group that we do need to touch on criminal justice reform. This is really big in South Texas, and I believe that we've done our job at the Texas Young Republicans of championing this issue. Trump's taken a lead. I think if we can change the title of this and add some of friendly meadows, I would be all in favor of that. Thank you all, and I look forward to the final product.
Jerry Harper, SD 21. I have to apologize, I don't have a lot of voice left. I spent a good part of my life in the spring of 2019 at the Capitol working on legislative priorities. And I also took with me a personal priority that was not part of it. And that personal priority was to stop forced annexation. And oddly enough, we got it passed. Having said all of that, at this time, I believe the downfall in our society goes back mostly to our education system. back in the fall of 2019, Austin Independent School District started bringing in some programs. They would have the drag queen sitting in the library, indoctrinating our kids. It was other stuff from the I can't think of all the letters. LBGTQ, ABCXYZ, whatever it is. But that's how our country's getting changed, by our children being indoctrinated. I brought a resolution for legislative priorities to make it where parents had to opt into these rather than opt out for a number of reasons. I can't find, it must have got cut, I don't see it there, but I really believe it's important. I'm not asking that we get it back in there. I just want to say that, like stopping forced annexation, that will be one of my personal priorities. And I have 2 senators and 2 House members that have told me they will carry it for me. So, and I'm sure that if we can get it into, I'm positive of that. So anyhow, other than that, I think we're doing a great job. I'm really ready to go home.
Good job.
I love y'all, but I'm just shocked.
Amen.
Yes.
Good morning, Troy Jackson, SD 23. Glad to be here. I have really enjoyed working with all of you guys. This has been a better legislative priorities experience that I've ever had. A very energetic team, to say the least. As far as the priorities that I brought in from SD 23, I believe that we have really touched them. You know, property tax relief is a big thing for all of those in SD 23 and CD 30, because we continue to see our property tax rates go up, but we continue not to see a return on the investment. And so I'm here advocating for that. That's one of the things, one of the agendas that we're going to see. And I'll be down at the legislative in their faces, making sure that we get this done. Not reform, but relief. In addition to that, the abortion is a big ordeal that I've discovered in SD 23. SD 23 has a large population of impoverished, I guess that wouldn't be the right term, but lower income citizens. And these lower income citizens have become victims of the abortion ring that's happening throughout the state. And so I'm advocating on their behalf to abolish abortion by any means necessary. We've got to get rid of it. In addition to that is the mere matter of the justice situation with equal parenting rights. There's a big discrepancy in what's happening in our family court system, and mothers and fathers alike are being isolated in this particular situation because of the fight that happens where the courts and the lawyers are getting all of this money, and now there's no money to actually go toward the children. So I thank you guys for working hard, working diligently to make sure that we can have these priorities before the legislature this year. And I promise to work just as hard on these, keeping them before our legislators when we go into session, as I do on all of the items that we'll be passing today. Thank you, guys.
Mike Devendale, SD 26, home of the Alamo, and as such, that was one of my mandates, was to protect it. And so, very happy that that's there. I do want to echo for other priorities that kind of missed the cut the first time around, the Class C misdemeanor on marijuana. I think that's, we need to take care of that issue. I think that would be an important thing for us to do. We're not trying to say to make it legal, as it's been said before, but just don't make it something that puts a felony liquor on them. Thank you.
Janera Lewis, SD 27.
Can we hold up just a second? I'm told that Robin Armstrong is coming. Oh, there you are, Robin. I didn't see. Sure appreciate the breakfast if y'all haven't seen that already. Robin, you want to take a few minutes? We got a microphone right there in the front, so.
Yes, first of all, thank you so much, Chairman, I appreciate that. Mark Rams is a great leader. Thank you guys for everything that you do for our party. I mean, you showed up to Houston in the middle of a pandemic, and so thank you very much, and God bless you all for doing that. You are on the front lines of the battle, and so it is absolutely essential that now more than ever, we fight for those things that we believe in. And I can tell you a long story about some battles that we've been facing in the medical community, me personally, trying to treat patients, how the bureaucracy and the government has really just put a heavy hand in stopping us from doing things that I'm very passionate about it and pretty angry about it as well. So, but keep doing what you're doing. God bless you for everything that you do. Keep up the fight. I will tell you, it is a fight, and it's going to be a fight. And convince our own to do the right thing. But God bless you, because you're on the front lines, and you're the ones that are like out front, because you're here this week. And so, thank you. God bless you. Enjoy the tacos and the food. It's the least that I can do for the sacrifice that you guys have made to make your way down here to Houston for this time. And so, God bless you, and keep up the fight, and you'll be hearing a lot of things going forward. God bless you. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks for all you do. By the way, before Dr. Armstrong leaves, he has taken a lot of heat, but he's been on the front lines of COVID, and he was one of the first doctors in the nation to seriously use hydroxychloroquine on his patients with great results.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Armstrong, that was my question, sir. I had a question for you about the hydroxychloroquine. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
So, Gene, you don't want to get me on my soapbox now. I might go on. But I would love to talk to you about it, man. I am passionate about that.
Yes.
And very angry about that as well.
Okay.
Because, what was your question?
My question was, what's the chances of them bringing it back? I know it's been kicked out more or less.
Well, you know, there's been two studies that come out recently, one out of Michigan, and then another one out of the Northeast somewhere, that have actually said that it reduced the deaths by half. And so now it's sort of on the positive upswing at this time. The FDA actually removed their emergency use authorization, which actually gives us more freedom to use it, because we've always been able to use it as an off-label use medication. And so right now, there's a doctor in Houston so I take care of hospital patients and nursing home patients. That's our practice. We have a huge practice right now that's taking care of a lot of COVID-19 patients. And what frustrates me is that physicians do not feel like they have the freedom to treat their patients the way they want to because of the heavy-handed bureaucrats and the medical boards. And so I believe people have died as a result of that. And so that's something that I'm really passionate about and angry about. And so I think that there has to be a lot of changes. And so I don't know how it's going to necessarily manifest itself right now, but yeah, there's going to be a lot. You'll be hearing about it for sure.
Well, God bless you for what you do, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, Matt Stringer, SD 31.
Yes, sir.
A quick question. Have you heard of Dr. Bartlett and his...
I know him. We on text message. We communicate a lot via text message.
He's my family doctor.
Oh, fantastic.
Great question.
One very quick question.
Sorry, Mark.
One very quick question. Would you consider running for governor?
I second that motion.
Very angry right now, very upset about a lot of things, so God bless y'all. Thank you very much.
So, good. One last question, J.R. Haas, SB7. So, you mentioned Dr. Bartlett, and I'm grateful for your advocacy on the oxychloroquine. I don't know how to say it, hydroxychloroquine. How do you think we get the message out about his treatment with the budesonide, and then using through the method of nebulizers? How do you think, not only in your district, but across the state, that we can get the message out?
I'll tell you, so State Senator John Hall, Bob Hall, I know Bob Hall very, very well. State Senator Bob Hall is like on this like a pit bull as well. And so we actually just had a town hall meeting that we did, me and 5 other physicians, where he's put that out. So we're trying to get that message out and trying to kind of change the narrative on medicines like hydroxychloroquine, budesonide, inhalers, and all that. And so that stuff, there's stuff out there that's cheap that works. And it just has to be used. And for whatever reason, the media's not pushing that. The governments are not pushing that. South Dakota governor actually did a statewide trial with hydroxychloroquine. So and they never closed their state. And so she was actually very bold in how she handled things. But I'll tell you, it's the word, we're trying, doing everything we can to get the word out.
Well, God bless you.
And in the midst of that, we're having retreats as well. You know what I mean? That takes a lot. So we're trying to get the word out now. There's a doc here in Houston, actually, that's just a pit bull on it. And she's given a lot and seen great success with it. And so I've given a lot in the hospital. We've treated with remdesivir, convalescent plasma. We've treated with everything. And we've seen some get better. We've seen some not. But I'll tell you, hydroxychloroquine used early on, I think, has a significant effect and prevent them from going into the hospital.
Well, God bless you, and thank you for your advocacy.
This is the Legislative Priorities Committee, and you mentioned that the doctors and the medical community feel like that their liberties to be doctors have been abridged by the medical boards and the bureaucracies. Do you think that rises to the level of something that we should consider as a legislative priority because we are the party of liberty in the land of liberty?
And I'll tell you, there's a lot of state reps and state senators that are going to deal with that in the legislative sessions. Well, I know that for sure. And I think it absolutely does. But I'll tell you, there's going to be a lot of state reps championing that cause in January 2021 for sure. And so, just because it's been eye-opening to me. I'm a conservative, so I understand bureaucracy and as government expands liberties, contract. I get that, but I've never experienced it firsthand. And it's a lot more powerful than we even know. So it's pretty amazing. And so it's something that it's a liberty killer for sure. So we have to be very cognizant. I'm of the mindset now that bureaucracy just needs to go in every way, even good bureaucracy. There's a lot of bureaucracy that helps people. I think the good and the bad, it just needs to go because it is God bless you all.
Dr. Armstrong, Mary Milton, SD19. One of the things that older people are living in fear because they say, what if I get it? My doctor says they won't give me. They won't prescribe this method of treatment. So you've got older people that are just hiding and they with no reason, they're just afraid of getting it.
Sure.
It's just horrible.
Sure, absolutely.
So that's the bureaucracy, I guess. Maybe the physicians don't know. Is that what you're saying, or they?
No, physicians. I'll say I was in the ER the other day, and so one of our hospitals is being overrun, admitting a lot of patients, and I was giving them some methods where to people home. And so I said, well, one you can treat. I gave them the regimen for hydroxychloroquine, sending the patients home. And he said, well, Robin, so am I going to get my license taken away by the medical board if I do that? And so that was a legitimate question that he asked. And so people are thinking about that, and that is hindering people from doing it. Wow. It's hindering people from treating patients the way that with something that they think. Another thing I'm thinking about today, as I was driving up here, I was yelling in the car by myself, that physicians are using using this themselves. They're giving it to their family members, but they're afraid to write it for their patients. So just think about that. They're taking it themselves, they're giving it to their family members, but they're afraid to write it for their patients. Let that sink in.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Janera Lewis, SD 27. To support the people who would like to see decriminalization of marijuana added back and the 10-day rule. And also, I'm making the recommendation that when we reconvene to discuss and reword, that we can save abortion to the very last one to discuss after we've wordsmith the prior 14. Just for efficiency's sake. Get the easy ones out of the way.
Lolly McClellan, BSD 28. I am very pleased to say that the concerns of my district are well represented within this list. So thank you. It's a pleasure working on this committee. Thank you.
Samuel, SD 29, and I also was looking over all the stuff submitted by El Paso and Hudspeth County, and they've all been covered. And I think this group has put together an excellent set. My constituents back in El Paso are going to be happy with constitutional carry, emergency powers that we worked on last night, equal parenting, property tax, the improvements on the bond voting. That is a really great idea, and the electrical grid. And so let's just power it through and get these out. It's great. Thank you all. It's been serving me.
John Berry, SD 30.
Hey, John, before we get started, just a heads up, Dale, I know you're just joining us, but I'll come to you after we finished up the last two here. And then my intent is to go to Paul Hobson, who we do have on Zoom. We're not sure he can hear everything that's going on. Oh, he says he can. Okay, so we'll go to Paul for his comments after Dale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Berry, SD 30. First, I want to thank every one of you for the opportunity to work with you guys. It's my first time in this committee, and it's an overwhelming experience and a pleasure to listen to every opinions. The issue that I have is a hot button issue for me. It's going to be criminal justice reform. Twofold. One, I think our party is making great inroads in achieving more minority support. Justice, if we address it boldly as we've talked about, will help us to continue to further strengthen our inroads in minority support. Second, I'm an avid law enforcement supporter and spend a lot of time with law enforcement. And our law enforcement is overwhelmed with the burdens that are placed upon them, many of them unfunded mandates through our state. In particular, the Sandra Bland Act places some unrealistic expectations. It's a 16-question sheet that an arresting officer has to answer to determine if that person is mentally sound. 16 questions. One of those questions is, have you lost or gained 5 pounds unexpectedly in the last week? Really? The other question is, the other question is, were you ever told that you're educationally challenged while you were in school? Those are two of the questions that the officer has to ask the person they're arresting. So if they ask that person, and the person says yes, now they're deemed mentally unstable. So now they have to be set aside for the Sandra Bland Act. Now we have to hold of MHMR to get them evaluated. Here's the great thing. MHMR will not evaluate that individual until the arresting officer decides, all right, I will have to release you on personal recognizance. Then MHMR will come and evaluate. Here's the kicker. In my area, MHMR will turn right around and say, oh, I'm sorry, we can't evaluate, we don't have any beds. So now the arresting officer has to release somebody they've arrested on their own personal recognizance, and nobody can do anything about it. That's a huge flaw in the Sandra Bland Act. And we need to adjust criminal justice reform. We've got to address that. And we've got to make it easier for these arresting officers. I think decriminalization or reducing marijuana possession to a Class C is one thing that will continue to lessen the burden on these officers that are out on patrol. In my county, I can only have 2 officers on patrol, and I have to have a 3rd one close to the jail. So if I have one who arrests somebody and takes them in, now I've got 1 officer on patrol in my entire county. We have got to, if we can set it up to where it's a non-jailable offenses cannot be arrested, this will reduce the burden placed on these officers out in the field. And I think that is something that we really need to strongly address. So again, everybody's so passionate and so well educated on their items, and I feel so privileged to listen to every one of your points. I just wanted to share that with you guys, and thank you for your time.
Matt Schwinger, SD 31. I'd like to start by saying that I've thoroughly enjoyed my time here and getting to know and work with each and every one of you. And it's been great to, being someone who loves all areas of public policy, it's been great to hear the discussions and deliberations, and y'all been a bright spot in my 2020. I got the list of legislative priorities document revision 1.0. I guess that's the one I'm working with, and I had a quick opportunity to look it over. The one thing that I thought I would suggest that we work on in here is that there's 2 different provisions, one called consumption-based tax and one referring to appraisal boards. And I feel like we should just call that abolish property tax, and in there, make it very clear that we want the legislature to achieve the goal of replacing schooling no and abolishing appraisal boards. So we can take those 2, make it one, consolidate down. Property taxes is an issue that a lot of people, when they found out I was being appointed to this, I had a lot of people from back home reach out. As a matter of fact, I'm staying with my aunt down here in Houston, and whenever I was about to head here yesterday, she looked at me and said, "Are y'all doing anything about property taxes?" And so the pain is real. School choice is another big issue for constituents back home. Whenever those issues come up on the referendums and the March primaries out there, I always see our counties voting overwhelmingly for it. And another thought that just occurred to me while Dr. Robin Armstrong was talking, some of you all might have heard, and some of you all might have seen the news, Dr. Richard Bartlett from back in Odessa has been treating COVID-19 patients with an inhaled steroid, zinc, and Z-Pak, and been having overwhelming results. And the media and the medical establishment has been attacking him. And I've talked to other doctors who are quietly prescribing the same thing and having great results, but they're afraid of retribution from the medical establishment, from the regulatory authorities. And so I'm wondering if, given the severity of this crisis of limiting our doctors to be able to innovate and go with things that they're seeing and communicate, and afraid of retribution, if we don't need to put a provision in there that calls for protecting our doctors. It's something that's a completely new thought, but I'm seeing the issue out there, and it would be something that the committees would have to deliberate more on and think more out. But I see that it is a major issue that's facing our state and our country because they're afraid of being silenced and punished by the regulatory authorities. The doctors are coming up with the solution.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
SD3, Paulette Carson. I know that earlier when I shared my comments that I had indicated there was one that I did not feel comfortable adding back into the list because I had not complied with your request of connecting with my legislators about it first.
Right.
I have since done that now, So may I throw that one back in and add my vote or comment to a lot of people here, the 10-day rule?
Only if you're gonna help work on it as well, but yes, yes.
I will be glad to do that. Thank you, sir. Sir?
Yeah, Dale? Dale.
I'm sorry.
Thanks so much. Walter sent me a message this morning, asked me to come here, so I've been diligently working this morning trying to catch up. I'll just talk a couple items briefly, rather than go on one item and go kind of more in depth, just so SD4 can be on record with some thoughts. I love what you said about property tax. I got some build, I also build homes, home builder, and I put tenants in them, I don't sell them, I keep them. And I tell my tenants every year when the new property tax bill comes out, I'll show you what my expenses are on property tax, and they go up and up and up. And in the last 2 or 3 years, several people have had to move out, says I can't afford it, and I said, well, neither can I. I have to get new tenants, and property tax is literally putting people out of their homes. I see it just 4 or 5 months ago, I had to tell someone, I'm sorry, I can't keep you here anymore, you gotta go. And it's heartbreaking, it's a very difficult situation, it puts families in a tough situation. So I do want to thank you for those that talk about property tax. Also, I'm a big police supporter. I live in Montgomery County, SD4, specifically in Conway. I have a farm ranch up in Walker County, I also raise cattle. I'm a big supporter of the police. My family, we like to go to the police stations, constables' offices, sheriff's department, giving them cold drinks, snacks in the summer, cold drinks, hot drinks, coffee, just giving gift cards continually. Big supporter of the police in word and in deed. I do believe in criminal justice reform. I mentioned earlier briefly in my intro that I do work in the prison system under the Rehab Program Division. A lot of what I have seen in our priorities, what I'm hearing here today from you distinguished members, I think a lot of it boils down to our problems are we don't have strong families. Whether it be the marijuana issue, kids looking for stuff. I've been very blessed in the last 30 years to have over 100 children live in my home. When they're in my home, we do not take a dime from the government. Their medical, their food, their clothes, their sports, their soccer, I pay for. And I let them know this is not from the government, it's from me. I love you like my child. We've helped some through college. I've married them now, I'm a pastor, we've done married, they've got kids, they're productive. It is directly equal parental sharing. I know we have a divorce state. I'm very big on both mom and dad should have equal access to their children. When I go to prison, I hear people, I ask them, how many of you know your dad? I might have about 10 hands raise up from about 50. I am convinced that that is a direct correlation. Absolutely convinced of it. So whatever that takes, when I ran against Brandon as a Republican some years ago, I ran for if dad moves into the house, we need to give the mom more money, not take money away. Because when you take money away from mom, guess what that mom does with dad? Kicks him to the curb. I said, if you're gonna bring dad in, we're gonna give you more money to reunite that family. That's just a policy issue that I'm working on, so that's not here, I'm sorry. Equal shared parenting, traditional family values. I just returned from the Syrian border. I do a lot of work in the Middle East as well. Iraqi, Syrian, Lebanon, and Jordan. I just got back from the Syrian border. Thank goodness for Kevin Brady's office called me and helped me get out. He said, if you need help get back here, I'll help you, so I did. But in any event, when I saw these tents with no indoor plumbing, no electricity, no food, strong family values. The kids are respectful, they speak respectfully to parents, and I look at our system versus their system with absolutely nothing. But they raise their children in a community that has values, moral values. I disagree with this statement, you can't legislate morality. Rape, theft, murder, assault, all those are moral issues, and we legislate them all the time. You can't enforce it, but you can legislate it, and you can punish immoral behavior. So I just wanted SD4 to have a couple items to be touched on. Those are some of the issues I'm concerned about, is building families. We may have to look outside the box, get some ideas. And my daughter, some years ago, I'm a Southern Baptist pastor, graduated from Southwest, working for my PhD now. She's a tattooed ex-congress.
So we have 6 pastors in the group total now?
About 6 or 7.
Maybe 7, I lost track. How many Christians?
Do we have another bed at his house?
Yeah, Dale's quite a guy. Okay, let's see, can we go to Paul Hodson on the Zoom call?
Wait.
We gotta get some
Okay.
Opportunity to serve on this committee. I'm going to pick my words here very carefully, and ironically, it is virtually killing me to not be there with you. If anybody knows me, they know I'm all about showing a strategic committee. We learned that with Convention Estates 4 years ago. What we want to share is what we learned through that process. I want to encourage all of us. I know Mark mentioned this early on Monday. This is the starting point. I believe we can get these priorities pushed through the legislature, but it's not up to us alone. The way to do that, the grassroots can move this. If we encourage him, Joe Palmer is one of the first people to come and speak. I've known Joe for 12 years. There's Joe Palmers in every district in this state. If at the Capitol, we are terrified if the grassroots take control. They're terrified of that. We've experienced it with Convention Estates. I've never moved legislation before. I only know one way to do it, and it's with massive numbers. And that's how you do it. Our goal is to have 100 activists at the Capitol every working day of the session. Period. If you want to pass legislation, that's how you do it. That's all I got to say. I think, look, I don't have issues. We can do this.
Haven't heard from Walt. He's had something to go to. He's supposed to zoom in later. When we get to delegate testimony, we get finished with the ones we got here. My intent is to open it up using Zoom for any remote that we have time for. Okay, well, I guess I'm not finished. So I would entertain a motion to do this. I've kind of kept track of different things y'all suggested adding to the list. If I heard I've added, if that's worth it, is on the ones I've added, I've put a little mark in front of them so you can see clearly what I've done. The only thing that didn't quite fit was I think Mr. Stringer's comment about combining the property tax one. That may well be what we end up doing, but right now they're really two separate things. Both are very important, but it's a little bit like the pro-life issue. It's two different ways to attack property taxes, and we don't really want to violate the single subject rule, but maybe we do want to put on
major approaches. One was either reform the existing system, the other was replace the existing system. Obviously, we can't wind up with both in the ultimate product.
Right, and it's really the same argument. It's incremental versus let's just get it done kind of thing.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Gail Tanner, SD 15. I had stepped out of the room. I didn't get to speak. I just want to mention.
I will send this out via email now, and as you work through, pardon me, as you work through voting, I propose we open up delegate testimony to get a few more delegates in as we're voting. And then at that point, we'll have the list, we'll go over the results. You'll take the ones that are left from your subcommittees and boil those down to where we're not writing law, we're capturing a simple, succinct, one subject concept. And as I said, red meat's allowed so long as it doesn't name actual office holders, except for cocaine Navarro's maybe.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I agree. Because the emergency powers, there were two committees, and we're
Yep.
voting on one.
I've already combined that to one. Which committee had the one that was on your right?
State Affairs.
State Affairs. Okay, we'll put that one on
So
State Affairs.
constitutional will not be dealing with that.
Correct, okay. Okay, give me a second, I'll send you the link via email. Matt, you want to start calling the delegates that we have? Start from the emergency power. Yeah, and Matt, you might remind them, since some are gonna be coming in and whatnot, what the rules were again.
Okay, fantastic. Good morning, everyone. The committee is now beginning public testimony. For those of you who weren't yesterday and aren't familiar with the rules, whenever you're called and you approach the microphone, you will introduce yourself, state your Senate district number, your delegate status, and speak to the issue, or name the issue that you're going to speak on. You will have 5 minutes for that issue, and we'll give you a notice over here whenever you are within a minute of your speaking time being finalized. Also, once you're done speaking, hang around for just a moment because the committee may have questions for you, and if not, we'll continue.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to clarify, can you, J.R. Haas, SD7.
There you go.
Can you just make sure, can we read the top 3 so we can keep an idea of who's coming in what order?
Yes, I'll let everybody know who's on the ballot. Okay, the first person to testify this morning is Nella. And on deck we have, I believe Rich DeAndre already spoke, right? On deck is Joe Palmer, Jeremy Baker, and Davis Ford. Please state your name, SD, and delegate status. Thanks so much.
Nilda Salato, Senate District 29, delegate. Also, El Paso County Precinct Chair, 122. Proud TFRW member, even prouder, red, white, and blue Republican. Founder of CCEP, Concerned Citizens of El Paso, together with my sister, washed by the blood of the Lamb, Debbie Barlow. Sidewalk Advocate for Life, Sidewalk Prayer Warrior, 40 Day for Life Day Captain, and if that wasn't enough, a Jewish Catholic. I stand and I fight for your faith and mine, for your family and mine, for all life from womb to tomb, and for our freedoms, which I and you should so richly enjoy, and today we don't. By now, I'm sure you've heard plenty of testimony on the life issue, maybe not so much on the 10-day rule issue. In the beginning, the earth was a barren wasteland, and darkness covered the abyss. And God said, let there be light, and he created light, the very first thing he did. And every time we walk into a darkened room, what is the first thing we as human beings do? We turn on the lights. We don't turn on the lights because we want to see. We turn on the lights because we're made by our Creator in his image and in his likeness. We turn on the lights because we emulate that very same Creator that every day we rationalize and justify the reasons, I've got a loud voice obviously, that we can stand against him. The pinnacle of his creation was man and woman. The founding fathers of these United States penned this immortal declaration into our nation's Declaration of Independence, stating, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I don't think that they thought at that time they needed to protect the life in the womb, that we are all endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. On January 22nd, 1984, the anniversary of Roe v. Wade, President Ronald Reagan declared it National Sanctity of Human Life Day, and here I'll take a moment to say, the courts do not make law, and thus Roe v. Wade is not a law. On January 22nd, 2020, President Donald J. Trump reaffirmed life in the womb, noting that, and I'll quote him, much of the greatest suffering in our nation's history has been the result of disgracefully misguided attempts to dehumanize whole classes of people based on these immutable characteristics. In his presidential proclamation, President Trump reaffirmed that we must affirm the truth that all life is sacred, that every person, and I directly quote, has inherent dignity and worth, and that no class of people should ever be discarded as non-human. Our own Republican Party of Texas' most recent platform states that we believe in the sanctity of innocent human life, created, and it's a quote right out of our platform, in the image of God, which should be protected from fertilization till natural death, and that all innocent human life must be respected and safeguarded from fertilization to natural death. Thus, the unborn have a fundamental individual right to live. You've heard much testimony from Abolish Abortion, so now I tell you a story. We make a lot of talk about protecting our communities from practices and policies. There's a lot of double talk as well. We can surmise that as long as there's no heartbeat, everything is good. But I'll tell you that I was pregnant for 10, count them, 10 months with a child that I was told was going to be born stillborn. 10 months they found no heartbeat. 10 months he never moved. And I prayed to God that, well, if I'm going to get my second degree, I really could do this on a Thursday. That'd be really great. And so it was. On a Thursday evening, I gave birth to a child that I knew that I would bury. Eyes wide open, reaching for the stars. He is my greatest joy. Heartbeat rule? By scientific standards, they wanted to pull him out of my womb. Today, him and his son after him are the greatest joy I could ever have.
Time.
Thank you.
Any questions? Yes, Hans, you're.
Hans Sassenfeld, SD 29. Milda, where do you come down on the total abolition versus the incremental approach?
Life was created by God. We each have half of a reproductive system. Man cannot create a child alone, neither can woman. It is together that reproduction happens. All life is viable life unless God himself takes it away.
Another question? Yes, sir.
Gene Pike, SD 13, just a statement. Milda, thank you so much for your stance. And I ask that God would continue to use you and your family.
Amen. Amen. Another question? Thank you so much.
Sorry, one more question. J.R. Haas, SD7. Let's see, do you support Prenda and Heartbeat Bill?
The what? I'm sorry.
The Prenda, pre-NDA? You're not familiar with the Prenda or Heartbeat Bill?
By the heartbeat bill, by the heartbeat rule, my child would not be here. They wanted to pull him out because there was no heartbeat. I carried him for 10 months. They found no heartbeat at all in the entire time. They continued to do sonograms continuously. He never ever moved. There appeared apparently to the world that he was not there. He was stillborn, and they wanted to pull him out at the very, very end for the same reason, because I was pregnant for 10 months. And according to them, he was deteriorating and disintegrating within my womb. So to answer your question, again, heartbeat rule, I have, and I had 13 children, don't get me wrong, he's not my only child, but this one, I was told, was stillborn, and you need to have an abortion. I believe in a God that saves, and my God can do anything.
Amen. So, given the choice between a bill or strategy that would basically just outlaw the ability for doctors to terminate the life of a child versus completely outlawing abortion from conception, which would you choose?
I would stand on the side of my God every day. He created life and only he can take it away.
Amen.
And I'll stand for every person's right to live. From the womb to the tomb, I don't believe in euthanasia either. We should not murder children on the altar of convenience. We should educate our population Abortion is not birth control, no matter how much they try to sell us it. And the minute we, as the red, white, and blue, stand against the God that saves, where do we really stand?
Amen. Thank you.
Rich, she was before you, you're recognized.
Julie Pickering, SD11. I'm going to call you Sister Nelda. Thank you so much for your courage and bravery and your faith. I have a dear friend also who was advised, because there was no heartbeat, to go ahead and have an abortion because the baby had died, and she went and got a second opinion, and it was a faulty ultrasound machine, and she now has a beautiful, healthy baby boy. So I just want to say thank you for your faith and your courage. Again, I guess they already asked the question, would you favor an incremental approach or completely abolish abortion?
I don't judge anyone for their decisions. That's my God's place to judge. However, I will not stand for murder under any conditions. I will stand every day and fight the good fight, even if it means standing alone. No heartbeat bill. No incremental. God gives us life without condition. Why do we make a condition for a child who is supposed to be in the safest place in the womb of the mother that God has given him? Why do we make it the unsafest place in the history of the planet?
Rich, you're recognized.
Rich Diod, SD9, thank you for being here. And I agree with you that abortion needs to be abolished. The question that has been asked of you a bunch of different ways here really boils down to strategy, because at this point, some of us don't believe that we can go forward and expect a bill to get through the Texas House. This is a legislative process, because half of them are Democrats, or a little less than half of them are Democrats, and not enough of them are that pro-life that they're willing to do that. So we don't think that can get done. So the two choices that we're wrestling with here are whether to put a priority in place that I don't think anybody in this room believes we can get past next time, or whether we try to chip away at it like we did with slavery, like England did, especially with slavery, or and they ended it that way. Constitutional carry is another example where we go incrementally and get more and more and bring the culture along with us as we pass laws. So the heartbeat bill would save most abortions. And what I'm wondering is, if you could get that passed in the next session, would you take that as an advantage to save those lives?
I stand on the sidewalk 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. But if I don't elect people who believe as I do, then nothing changes. Too often we as voters, as citizens of this great nation, are willing to compromise. I hear what you're saying to me. Will I accept compromise for the first 10 days and say that abortion doctors can kill in the first 10, right? Is that what you're asking? But after the heartbeat is detected, have it, you can't have at it anymore. But then in a case like mine, where I went 10 months without a heartbeat, multiple doctors, multiple sonograms, week after week, what then? What excuse do we use then? So then I would say that the true nature of this is that we need to remember that Roe v. Wade is not law. And we have law on the books that says we do not kill and we don't murder in Texas. And I will also say I'm not Texas born. I am red, upstate New York mountain girl, New York born, Texas strong, true grit, and I'll stand every day for what's right. No, I don't believe we can compromise, but I do believe we can educate. And that's why the sonogram is so important. So I heard somebody here talking about Planned Parenthood yesterday, and Planned Parenthood goes out and says to their people, well, you're gonna see protesters on the sidewalk, just ignore them. And then they do the sonogram because it's state law in the state of Texas, but let's turn off the volume so you can't hear the heartbeat. And you can't know that it's a human being. And we do this every day. We dehumanize human beings. And the new version of dehumanization is the face mask. Because then I can only see your eyes, and maybe not even then. Because if you look at people with the face mask, you no longer recognize them sometimes. I believe the eyes lead directly to the soul.
Amen.
I don't believe we can compromise with the heartbeat bill. I think we need to enforce the laws on the books. And we need to stand firm. This is already law. Roe v. Wade is not law. And we need to start holding judges accountable to the judicial system. We have 3 branches of the government, not 2 that work together and 1 that all by itself. 3 independent branches of government. And it's long past time that citizens of these United States of America begin educating and promoting the education of what no longer is known. I was sitting in a church in the Diocese of El Paso, because I did tell you I was Jewish and Catholic, right? So my brothers say I'm confused, and I say, no, I'm complete. That is, of course, my Muslim brother that says most. But a very diverse household, as you can imagine, and I'm all about talking all the subjects on the books. And the diocese was telling me that we migrated in the United States, not from east to west, but rather from south to north, and everybody in El Paso knows that. By the way, SD 29 is Culberson, El Paso, Hudspeth, Jeff Davis, and Presidio counties in the house today. I'm sorry, I grew up and we migrated, we landed on Plymouth Rock. Maybe they weren't the first, but we landed on Plymouth Rock, and I remember this thing called the Mayflower, and the Pinta, the Santa Maria, and I can't remember the third boat because I'm free to pass history. We need to educate. That's the key.
Well, I think that's very true, and we do that. Now, let me just ask you one other thing. Do I understand that you are a sidewalk counselor outside
Yes, I am.
Christian clinics, and you do it a lot?
I'm out there all the time.
Yeah.
We run 7-week stands for life. 7 is the number of completion in the Bible.
Yeah.
7 days God created heaven and earth. There are 7 is not mentioned over and over and over in completion. We do 7 weeks, not 40 days, but 49.
I want to thank you. I want to thank you for doing that. There's a lot of people that are sort of philosophically pro-life, but not as many will stand in the gap like that. So thank you for doing that.
It's not easy to do.
Before I go to the next question, I would just like to remind the committee members, we're getting a lot of requests from the viewers online. Please speak into the microphone as loudly as possible so that they can hear. They're having a hard time hearing the questions from the committee members. Before I go to you, I saw earlier before Rich Diot spoke a hand down here. I didn't know if you were still wanting to speak. Yes, sir.
My question, just to be clear, because maybe I missed it, and just a yes or no, if we could abolish abortion tomorrow, would you be for that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And
Ma'am.
God bless you.
And I'll come to every single Senate district and train y'all to be out on that sidewalk.
The gentleman from SD11.
Three out of every 4 people who show up for an abortion do not go in. They'll turn around and they'll go away because they see you on the sidewalk. You men are stronger presences than women. Because somebody said earlier, men are no longer part of the household, and that's very true. We need to bring our families together. Stronger families make stronger communities. Education. And I don't need to preach it to the choir.
The gentlelady from SD11.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Julie Pickering, SD11. Since you do so much counseling for women who are seeking abortions, part of our deliberation is deciding whether or not the penal code will be applied to women who receive an abortion. I'm sorry. Part of our deliberation is deciding whether or not the penal code, in other words, women will be charged with murder for having an abortion. What is your stance on that?
I firmly believe that we don't have an educated population when it comes to the viability of life. I believe that our communities, our citizens have been exposed to too much propaganda to disseminate between truth and fiction. I believe that in such instances, these women and men don't come with the proper mindset to make a true and informed decision. I say that because of the women and the men that we counsel on the sidewalk. More often than not, it is the man who goes in, his girlfriend, the girlfriend's boyfriend, the boyfriend, the husband, the partner that stops the abortion because God touched his heart from what he heard on the sidewalk. So no, I don't believe that criminalizing the women and the men who come without full information is appropriate. I do firmly believe that the doctors and the nurses in the facility are very well informed about what they're doing. And those are the true criminals here, because they don't even, oftentimes, they don't even give them the information for adoption or any other methodology.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, J.R. Haas, SD7. Ma'am, would you support a bill that did criminalize women to basically be, not criminalize them, but criminalize the behavior, because we said it's already murder, right? So we established that if those women and fathers were protected in our existing penal code already by criminal defense for, say, mistaken fact, which is basically what you said. They've been raised and discipled for 20, 30 years, being taught that life is, or children, preborn children are just a clump of cells. If you knew they already had existing protection under the law, would you support a bill that would go ahead and say, hey, we believe that abortion is murder, and we believe that anyone involved in that, in the practice of taking that life prematurely, that they deserve to come before a court, and then they can determine whether or not those people had a case of mistaken facts, maybe they were taught wrong, or the judge could determine if those people basically knew what they were doing and they continue to press on anyway.
There's a big, huge gray area in there, and I'm very black and white. I don't like gray. Or today, blue and white. But I don't like gray. So when we say that somebody's been indoctrinated for 10, 20, 30 years, or in the new generation, they've been indoctrinated their entire lives. They don't even know the history of the United States, let alone where life begins or what the nucleus of a family is. How could they ever come to that knowledge of right from wrong at this point when we have a whole generation that believes it's all about what I believe is right and what you believe is wrong, and I can't listen to you, and all we got to do is look at the riots on the streets where they're so misinformed. So then do we say that that's okay? No, we don't. But then do we criminalize somebody and leave it to a judge when our judges are so already so biased? I don't think that's proper either. I think that there's got to be a balance and equilibrium. If you're going to have something like that, then the first offense has to have some kind of moral recognition therapy, not jail time, not prison time, not fining time. Because let's face it, these women who end up having and going through with an abortion in their post-abortive stage are more likely, and I don't mean by a minor margin, we're talking about more likely in a large percentage to fall into prostitution, to fall into drug addiction and post-abortive depression. Even though that's not a good talking point, it's a reality. And how do we know this? From the women and the men that we counsel on the street. From the woman who shows up 20 years later, sees you standing on the sidewalk and stops to tell you, thank you so much, I wish somebody would have been here 20 years ago, I paid the price, and I just got out of this life. Do we judge her? He who is without sin, throw the first stone. That stone will not be cast by me. So if you're going to do some kind of penalization, there has to be some kind of education piece involved. So a first offense, there's plenty of types of therapies. Moral recognition therapy is used long-term. For the gentleman on the far side who spoke about criminal justice, we used it successfully in the criminal justice system in South Florida when I was there. And there are other forms that are not penalizing, not punitive, and they're not rewarding either. They're educational. So I would have to say to criminalize and penalize in the normal sense, I couldn't go along with, but I could work something out where there's some kind of progressive movement to not just stop it in its tracks, but educate along the way.
Well, thank you for your comments. I think in the scriptures, we were taught that the law is a tutor. So I think by making it law, that is education. So thank you for your time.
Before we go to the next question, I would just like to ask the committee to please keep your comments as concise as possible. We spent a good amount of time here, and I'll also let you know we have a considerable amount of witnesses signing up, and we have a lot of committee work to get done today. Just bear that in mind as you continue to ask questions. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from
Madeline
SD5.
Lucier, SD5. Thank you, Nilda, for being here. You just reminded me of something. I hadn't thought about it in a while, but thank you for sharing your story. My mother, 43 years ago, was pregnant with her third child, and because she was 40 years old, the doctor told her her baby would have Down syndrome, and she had to argue with the doctor not to abort him because it was her third pregnancy and she knew he was normal based on her other pregnancies. So if she had listened to her doctor today, I wouldn't have a little brother. So I am for abolishing abortion, and I thank you for being here.
Thank you.
The gentlelady in the back.
Bonnie Luca, secretary. Nelda, thank you so much for your testimony. I think it has stirred something in this committee. I too had a very similar experience. I had amniocentesis. It said there was something wrong, but I refused to give up on my child. And my daughter now is here. I mean, not present here today, but she has given me 3 wonderful granddaughters. And she is perfectly normal, healthy, wonderful. I just kind of wanted to caution this committee in that we do have a lot of work to do, but, you know, there's been a couple of things said about protecting doctors. And we got to make sure that we're focusing on protecting these children. And there is a lot of bad advice out there. We got that 10-day rule that we need to focus on, hopefully. We need to also remember that doctors do have a lot of protection. And there's so many more important things right now, I think, that we have to really concentrate on criminal decriminalization and criminal reform, etc. So I just want to say, while all this stuff is important, we've got to focus on some of the things that, there's a lot going on right now. And I guess the question I would have for you, how did you reconcile all this with your doctor?
When I kept my child, I was very, very young when I was married. I didn't know the world. This child that I speak of was not my first. In fact, to give you an idea of how naive and how innocent and how sheltered my life was, when I went to have my first baby and they said push, I was like, push what? For the second child, which is the one I speak of, when they mentioned that I needed to have an abortion, it was simply my faith. I've always walked with my God, even when the world turned against me for believing in a God that saves and for being born again before it was acceptable. I make no excuses. I offer no apologies for who I am, and I'm willing to stand, like I said, every day alone. But I'll fight, and I'll fight for what's right. I'll fight for you. I'll fight for me. I'll fight for everyone, regardless of whether we agree or disagree. If you're in a situation, you're in a pinch, and you're gonna hear from somebody from SD 29 on a totally different subject, and she'll let you know that when she thought maybe that she was standing alone, she knew she wasn't, because we have warriors every day. You're standing as warriors right now, even though you don't realize it. You're wearing breastplates and helmets of salvation. Every one of us is. Today the question is, do we stand with our God? And that day the question was, do I stand with my God? So when they continued to attack me and attack me and attack me, that I needed to have an abortion, that I was gonna lose my life, that if I didn't do this, and they gave me like a myriad of things, and I was very, very young. And I said, if God wants me to die, then it's my time. Let's go. And today I stand here 10 years after the fact that I was told that I was gonna die 10 years ago. And every morning I wake up and I thank Him for the breath of life, knowing it's a borrowed day. And I'm glad to have a borrowed day in front of you today. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I hope if in any way you felt your heart touched or tugged, that you felt the Spirit of God within you, because each one of you has His Spirit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair? Yes, sir. I'd like to make a motion to amend our rules, please. I'd like to amend the rule considering testimony and questions by the committee to append to the end that each person giving testimony and questions will be limited to 1 per committee member, 3 total.
So the question before the body is to amend the standing rules to limit questions from the committee members or witnesses to,
Sorry, one per member, 3 total. And Sean Sheehan, SD 17, apologies for that. Yeah, per testimony.
And Shelby Williams, SD 8, second.
hold on a second, I've got to write it down.
Sorry.
There's a second, is there discussion?
I'd just like to speak to this briefly. So we've got, over 20 folks that are on the 2 sign-in sheets, or signed up on the 2 sign-in sheets that Matt's got in his possession. There's another sign-in sheet outside. Got a lot of folks that have traveled to Houston to speak to us. We're running out of time. SREC meeting starts at 2 o'clock, and we have a lot of work left to do as a committee. I feel we need to respect the time of the folks that have traveled here to let them say their piece, and I appreciate everybody wants to get on the record with what are great discussions and great comments, but we've got to get through this.
Other discussion? Shelby Williams, you're recognized.
I'd like to add why I support this. The spirit of asking questions should be to get clarification on testimony, I believe. We're going to have plenty of time to debate this amongst ourselves, and many of the questions for testimony have devolved into debate.
Other questions?
J.R. Haas, SD7, being guilty of one of the ones that's been asking lots of what I would biasly say were good questions. I also support this.
The gentlelady from SD3.
Paulette Carson, SD3. I also support the amendment to the standing rules or the motion, but may I ask a question? Is that in order or out of order in discussion? I would also like to ask, would it be feasible and productive for us to also add a time limit to the discussion back and forth? Because that's what's running, I think, not just the number of questions, but the time we're devoting to each one as well. I'd offer that back to you to amend your motion, possibly, sir? Friendly amendment?
We'll call it friendly since those are to, let's say 10 minutes per testimony total, including questions. 15?
I think it'll take care of itself. If we have 3 questions, it's going to take care of itself.
Okay, yeah, we're good.
So it's not considered a friendly?
No, let's scrap.
We're good.
Yeah.
Call the question.
Yeah.
Call the question?
Yes.
Okay, so the motion before the body is to amend the standing rules to limit, 1 question per member, 3 total questions per testifier.
Point of order. You have to vote on a call to question. That's,
Gene Peck, SC
Calling
13,
the question.
calling the question.
Jonathan Gaspard, SC 12
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Now we're voting upon, so the calling the question passes. Now we're voting on the proposed motion by Sean Sheehan. The question before the body is to amend the standing rules, one question per member, 3 total questions per testifier. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. The motion passes. We're going to now proceed with delegate testimony. Is Joe Palmer? No, okay, we're going to go to the next one. The committee calls Jeremy Baker. Don't see him either. The committee calls Mr. Davis Ford. Please state your name, SD number, delegate status, and the issue you plan to speak on.
Chairman, next week.
Yes, sir.
Next week.
Oh, yeah, let's see here. The next 3 on deck is Mr. John Seago, Jason Vaughn, and Rebecca Hardy. Proceed, sir.
Davis Ford, SD 24, formerly of SD 31. And I'm here to speak on an issue that I think touches on so many. You know, I learned my lesson from yesterday, so I'm not going to mention all the
Are you a
wonderful
delegate?
things that I think ought to be
Are
on
you a
here.
One moment, sir. Are you a delegate?
What?
Are you a delegate?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
What SD? What SD?
SD 24. Did I not say that? Anyway.
Yeah.
Speak into your microphone, please. Excuse me, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I'm a little tall for this thing, so. All right, so anyway, I learned that I got to get to this one thing, so I'm not going to mention all the really, really fun, important things that I think need to be on there. So I won't mention taxpayer-funded lobbying, education on the constitutional and Declaration of Independence, ballot security, pro-life, abolish abortion, constitutional carry, vaccine choice, and constitutional amendment to make it 3/4 of counties voting in favor of a Texas constitutional amendment, border security, and abolish property taxes. I'll try to pass over those, so I didn't mention that. However, I think the most important thing we could be discussing right now is something that touches on everything that we're doing, and I think something that will garnish a lot of support from you guys. And if you think about how this really needs to be, what is the major malfunction with our state and with our country? And that is, our founders said that our Constitution was only fit for a moral and religious people. And to that end, this is what I think needs to be in our priorities. I think you'll agree it touches so many of the other things. Every student in the state of Texas shall receive a physical Bible, physical copy of the Bible, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Federalist Papers, and read and study those documents every semester. Now, I think that that is extremely appropriate for government to be doing, and the reason I can say that without equivocation is that we are a constitutional republic. So many people think this is a democracy. They just loosely think this is a democracy. Let's define some terms here. What is a democracy? You can do it in 2 words. It's majority rule. It's literally mob rule. But we are a constitutional republic. However, unfortunately, even though you guys are here, you're conservative, you're active, obviously, a lot of us couldn't put a definition to that. And it took me a lot of years. I've been involved in politics for 55 years, believe it or not. Started when I was a little boy, helping my dad run for state rep against the Democrat Speaker of the House. So I've been around a little bit. So what is a constitutional republic, and why should we do what I just said here? Well, constitutional republic has 4
major points. Take notes. Really, take notes. A constitutional republic, we elect our representatives. Number one, we have rule of law. Okay, we're not supposed to just have a pen and a phone and do things willy-nilly. We have a triune government with checks and balances. Okay, so each part of our government, the legislative, the judicial, and the executive, are all supposed to power check the other two. And the states and state governments are supposed to power check all the above. So we have checks and balances. That's part number 3. I hope you guys are taking notes, really. But number 4 is the most important part about a republic. Any republic. Our republic, the People's Republic of China, North Korea, the old USSR, United Soviet Socialist Republic. Every republic, to be a republic, has unchanging principles and values. Without that, you just have a fancy democracy, right? So what are our unchanging principles and values? Well, with those communist countries, theirs is Marxism. The Communist Manifesto, what is ours? Our unchanging principles and values, the ones that our forefathers espoused and followed, was scriptural principles. Without scriptural principles, we wouldn't have made it 244 years. So our unchanging principles and values need to be espoused in this country. And so that's why every student, as was the practice years ago, even up to 1955 in Dallas ISD, every student had a Bible, the need to read that. Every student ought to have a copy of the Constitution and read that. Every student ought to have a copy of the Declaration of Independence and read that. And then, look at the other founding documents as well. So that is my little speech to you guys today. I hope that is helpful, because it took me years to figure out what a republic is and why it's different from a democracy. So hope you'll take that to heart, and thank you.
Thank you. Does committee members have any questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you, sir.
The committee calls Rebecca Hardy. Please state your SD number, delegate status, and the issue you intend to speak on.
Raise it just a little bit. Rebecca Hardy, delegate from SD9. And I'd like to speak on the 10-day rule. Chairman, committee members, thank you so much for your work here. I'm going to hop right into it because I have a lot to say. I normally advocate for another issue entirely, but I felt compelled to speak to this committee after hearing some very disturbing testimony yesterday. Repealing and replacing the 10-day rule must be a legislative priority for the RPT. Disability should never equal death, nor should it ever be a reason to deny treatment or standard of care. This is the very essence of what pro-life should mean. The limited data that has been collected by advocacy organizations clearly demonstrates that many of the patients who have had the 10-day rule invoked are primarily minority and uninsured patients. The truth is, it should not make a bit of difference who did or did not support this bill at the time of passage. Legality is not a guide to morality. Well-intentioned legislation often has unintended consequences, and the Texas Advanced Directives Act, which legislated the 10-day rule, is a case in point. Rather than creating a dispute resolution process, it has become a legalization of euthanasia for those Texans who are uninsured, underinsured, and disabled in a state which loudly claims to be at the forefront of protecting life. The irresponsible rhetoric being dispensed by pro-life experts with no direct or personal first-hand knowledge of these 10-day cases is not only
ignorant is incredibly dangerous. For example, a statement recently given in the media in the Baby Tinsley case by a pro-life expert compared the ongoing treatment of a child with complex medical needs to torture and experimentation and akin to Nazi Germany. This is not only a dangerous and slippery slope, it is also patently inaccurate and straight up discrimination against the disabled. Disability should never equal a death sentence, and reliance on medical technology for life-sustaining care does not equate to torture. Today, some Texans who proudly proclaim themselves pro-life are advocating for euthanasia for an African-American child and other minority individuals because, in the very words of the doctor who invoked the 10-day rule in Baby Tinsley's case, said, the child's underlying condition will never be cured. Thousands of Texans live every day with underlying conditions that will never be cured. Does a disability or reliance on medical technology mean that life has no value and isn't worth living? Does it make it acceptable to deny a human being basic life-sustaining care simply because a single medical professional has determined that it is futile and wants to take the place of the family in determining what is acceptable quality of life? The bottom line is that physicians and medical professionals disagree all the time. Doctors around the country are horrified to hear about this 10-day rule in Texas. I personally know of thousands of Texas families who were told that their child would never make it, that their condition was medically impossible to treat, and these same families have their loved ones that are alive today because of expert medical intervention from outside specialists. The decision to provide standard of care and basic medical treatment should always be made by the individual and their family in collaboration with their trusted medical professionals. And the fact is that in these cases, empirical data regarding transfers and requests and second opinions means very little because the usual channels and processes have completely broken down. In Baby Tinsley's case, the doctor who invoked this rule and the hospital who supported the ethics committee's decision loudly and public insisted back in November that Tinsley's death was imminent. And now today, 8 months later, Tinsley Lewis continues to fight for life and hold her own. Had Baby Tinsley received basic medical standard of care and given a trach last July, she would most likely be at home with palliative care. I have so much more to say with that, but I feel like my time's running low, so I'm going to skip. There are many Texans, possibly even some of you in this room today, who depend on daily medical intervention and technology and would not be here today if it were not for significant intensive medical interventions, which at the time... Time, okay.
I believe we have a question from Mr. Diott.
Yeah, Rich Diott, SC9. Rebecca, thank you for being here, and thank you for that fabulous testimony. There is a new development today in the Tinsley case, and I want to ask you about your feelings about this with respect to the 10-day rule. So, yesterday, a motion to compel was filed in Tarrant County Court to compel the hospital to allow 2 expert doctors who are experts in the conditions that she has, that believe she's been mistreated, and they are going to do a tracheostomy if the court agrees with them. How does, and that's a brand new development as of right now, it's just hit the news. How do you feel about that with respect to that 10-day rule? Thank you.
Thank you. I would just like to say that I am honored today to be a vessel for the organization Protect Texas Fragile Kids, and they are the experts on this. I did read the headline along with you, Mr. Diott, about the motion, and it comes down to protecting these families and their rights to be able to make decisions with their trusted providers and not these bureaucratic boards that are ultimately for protecting their interest, their profit interest for their hospitals.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Before you call the next the next testifier. Just wanted to bring the committee up to date on why I suddenly bolted out of the room. The Rules Committee was on the verge of completely changing everything and forcing us to go to 5 only going forward. We were successful with the help of the Rules Chair in restoring the 15 and taking the top half of that, thankfully. There was, I don't know who it was, but somebody gave testimony that said that the members of this committee disagreed with me and that I wasn't representing the committee well. It's okay, it's okay. We won the vote. I know y'all passed some rules tightening up the time just a little bit. I would implore you to tighten that up further. And perhaps even nothing more than quick yes/no questions. I would suggest that we, as much as you can possibly restrain yourself, leave the pro-life questions alone for the rest of the testimony. Most importantly, I've only got 12 responses back on the vote, and that's what's going to determine the top 15. So if you have not taken your vote yet, please do that as the delegates are testifying. So, okay, back to you, Matt. Unless someone has a motion on time limits or...
SD 9, Rich Scott, I'd like to move that are we at 5 minutes still?
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to move 5 minutes to 3 minutes.
Okay, it's been moved that we go from 5 minutes to 3 minutes for future speakers. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Okay, yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to further amend the rules to restrict the time per person across all topics to 8 minutes.
Okay, we've got a total restriction, which if memory serves me, would reduce the total time from 8 minutes to 5 minutes. Is that what you said?
From 15 to 8.
15 to 8, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. 15 to 8. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. That motion carries too. Thank you, members. So now we've got an 8-minute total and a 3-minute per item limit. Yes, sir, Hans?
Hans, I spelled SD 29. I make a motion that the questions be limited to yes and no.
Okay, that the questions be limited to yes and no with no speeches before them. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Nay. The ayes have it. Thank you, members. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Yes.
Was there discussion allowed on that last motion?
There was not.
Sorry, I was signaling to speak on it.
I'm sorry, the vote's been taken. Sorry. Okay, Matt, you want to go back to the delegates? While we're counting the votes, get your vote in. I'm only at 12 votes right now.
Okay. The committee calls John Seagat.
Thank you. This is my second time to speak. I spoke yesterday, so I think I have 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Please state your SD and the issue you're going to speak on and delegate status.
Yeah, my name is John Seago. I'm a delegate from Senate District 25, and I'm here to speak in favor of repealing the 10-day rule. I was afraid that no one else was going to address this, so I really appreciate the testimony before me. I serve as the legislative director for Texas Right to Life. We're the largest and oldest pro-life organization in Texas. I also have a master's in bioethics. I wrote my master's thesis on this topic, so if you need something to help you sleep tonight, let me know, and I can send you my master's thesis to read about this topic. I'm also a doctorate student in bioethics, so I care really deeply about this issue. If you're interested in digging into this, let me know. We have a lot of resources on this topic because this is an incredible attack on not just Texans' right to life, but also due process. And my organization, Texas Right to Life, we're the only organization, pro-life organization, that helps patients in this. We're the only organization you can call if your loved one is undergoing this, if doctors are forcing you to withdraw treatment, then we're the only organization that can help you. We'll come to you, we'll go to the ethics committee, we'll help transfer your loved one, and we've done it hundreds of times before. And so we have a unique perspective on this topic because we see the inner working of this process. We see how it's been abused. We see how good intentions of 1999 have actually not been fulfilled. In fact, those patients' protections that we were guaranteed would protect patients in this, and it would only be used very rarely in 1999. Texas Hospital Association, Texas Medical Association, they lied to us. Those safeguards were not enough to protect patients. And so we're here, and we figured that out pretty quickly after 1999. So I'm asking you to stand with the 25 SDs or county conventions that passed resolutions to make repealing the 10-day law a legislative priority. This law is unprecedented. No other state handles this situation like that. When a doctor and a patient disagree about a ventilator, no other state does this. Virginia was mentioned last night. Virginia is way better than Texas because they don't give the doctor legal immunity. That's huge. The doctor has a blank check right now in Texas. Virginia doesn't have that. In fact, in 2018, Virginia put more patients' protections in their law. And I would love to see that in Texas. So we are unprecedented. It's unconstitutional as well. Our Attorney General, our Republican Attorney General, has filed briefs in court saying this current law, the 10-day rule, is unconstitutional because it doesn't give vulnerable patients due process. Also, I want to mention it's unethical because this doesn't just apply to dying patients. This applies to any patient. As long as that patient is dependent on life-sustaining treatment, a ventilator, or dialysis, this law could apply to you. We've had conscious patients.
Time.
Thank you.
Does the committee have any questions? Yes, Ms. Lewis.
Sir, it's not a question so much as here's my email address. I'd like a copy of your master's thesis.
Any other questions for the witness? Yes, in the back.
This case SD16. So am I correct that this can actually override somebody's written contract with your attorney? If you've got a written medical authorization, no matter how airtight it is written, that this can be overwritten with this 10-day rule?
Yes, ma'am. This rule, you can still have treatment withdrawn even if you have an advance directive that's written by your attorney.
One more question from the committee? Thank you so much. Committee calls Jason Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Shelby Williams, SD8. I'd like to make a motion to fix the schedule for today. There seems to be some confusion about what's going to happen and when, and as well to determine until what time this round of public testimony will go and when we may open up the next round.
That would be out of order at this time. We need to get the vote finished first.
Right.
You may proceed. Please state your SD delegate status and the issue you plan to speak on. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, and I appreciate that, Rich, right before John and I come up. You're just great at that. Anyway, my name is Jason Vaughn. I'm with SD13. I'm also the policy director for Texas Young Republicans, and it's in that capacity I'm speaking here. My predecessor is actually on the committee as well, Jonathan. I appreciate having such big shoes to fill. But the topic I'm hearing y'all have not heard a lot about today, criminal justice, but yet you have heard a lot about, well, you probably haven't heard a lot about it from the media either, because they decided not to cover our president's greatest achievements, which was the First Step Act. One of them, one of many, thankfully. But how many of you watched the Super Bowl this year? A few of you, hopefully. You might have seen a commercial that starred our president and Miss Alice Marie Johnson talking about the First Step Act. And the reason I say this is because criminal justice is a winning topic for us, and it's a great, not only is it great for us to do, because it is small government, it's something that we can push, that it aligns with our priorities over and over again to say that it is not the role of government, but yet it is also a winning campaign topic. I can't tell you, one of my best friends, who I've got to vote for several Republicans now, is the former president of the Black Democrat Voters Caucus. And why? Because we became friends based on criminal justice issues. And because of that, I was able to show him a side of Republicans and show him what small government can really mean. Because these guys are going out there, you know, they're talking about defund the police and all that kind of nonsense. And I'm going, you want to know how you have less interaction with police? Have less laws. Have less opportunities for that to happen, and then we win. You know what? That's small government conservatism right there. That's what you want. That's how we win. So you've got two before you on this: the Sandra Bland Act that we're asking to pass, no jail for no arrest for non-jailable offenses. That one is one of our priority issues that we're asking for, and bail reform is the other one. If you have not looked, I mean, sure, all of you voted in the primary, I hope. The number 3 top bail initiative ballot was the bail issue, because there's too many people being let out of prison because they have money, and nobody should be let out of prison just because they have money. And we shouldn't be paying for people to be kept in prison for ridiculous things either, just because they don't have money. And if it's a non-violent act. I've not slept, by the way, in like 3 days, so I'm sure you guys know what that's like, so.
Me too.
Don't interrupt me, I only have 3 minutes. Thanks, Rich. Oh, deja vu. Anyway, I appreciate you guys considering those things. 95%, by the way, voted for that language. Please consider making that and Sandra Bland. And put it at the top, by the way, because here's what's going to happen. You're going to vote for 15. People are going to bubble everything in, just like they do. That's why we passed a plank that says, this plank, do not vote for this plank. It does not really exist. Everybody vote yes, and 67% voted yes. That's how it happens.